too buku, brother. You too buku.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Rotate your device. You cannot turn your phone while live. All right, should be fine.
But you always got
live now. Should be.
Boy, your boy brought that song back to light. Oh,
right,
you being so horny, remember?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And they went after his rap song after he took that piece off of Full Metal Jacket.
Mm-hmm.
Me love you long time, G.I.
O2 Live Crew. You want me to get it?
Yeah.
There it is.
All right, I'm gonna place you on hold, and I'm gonna call Judge real quick. Well,
what you did to the judge and lost him, didn't you?
We had him.
We had him on.
He was on, but maybe he's using the restroom or getting a snack or something. I do not know.
I'm doing that right now. I wouldn't talk to you if I wasn't on the shitter.
Yeah, I used to have a show called Bathroom Talk. It didn't last that long.
Sounds like a white man's idea. No brother comes up with no shit like that. No pun intended. Damn, dude. What's wrong with you? Motherfucker. See, that's what happens when Rush Limbaugh dominates Missouri and shit. God, dang.
Oh, man. I'm still fucking heated at how they did me with Jacqueline Badalore's video. That's why we're going on Facebook right now.
Did you check your email?
Look, it's gone.
I'm saying, did you check your email?
No.
Check your email.
I'm not gonna check it. Check it right now.
No, just when you get a chance.
No, I have checked it lately. Shit, I checked it all the way up until 4 o'clock this morning. And,
you can't reach the judge. You're busy checking your fucking email.
I know. Here, you gotta. I don't know how to work this phone, dude. Of yours, your little Samsung here.
Samsung. I've got a Samsung. Most people don't even know Samsung was the one that sponsored the world tour for surfing. And when they dropped out 2 years ago, surfing's been going to shit ever since.
What the fuck?
They were like
everything's connected.
Oh, I know why.
Let me try to. All right.
Remember what I told you the last time I was on your show? The Hutus and the Tutsis got together, and then they got on the same airplane, and they both got killed in Rwanda. Let's hope the two leaders of Korea don't end up getting on the same airplane.
Right. Oh, that would be. But I think Kim Jong-un is too smart for that. You got to put in your code on this phone whenever you finish tech stuff over there.
There we go.
Got rid of the female. Nobody talks about the female that was in charge of Korea, South Korea, they call it, before this new guy came in.
All right, we live on YouTube too. Oh, wrong way. There we go. That's better. I gotta decline that. All right, we're good.
All right.
Where is Judge Joe Brown located right now?
Memphis.
Yeah, he should be in Memphis.
Oh, so he's like 2 hours ahead of me?
Yeah, he's in our time zone.
Oh.
Hold on.
You know, Memphis is the only area that's a blue area of Tennessee.
The rest is red, huh? Well, that makes sense.
Yep. Well, that doesn't make sense. That's sad.
Well, you got, we know the score. I'm going to be rich one day, so I'm going to be a Republican because I'm going to be rich and not give nobody shit. And they're never going to be rich. They're going to die in their little trailer park, clinging onto that whiskey bottle. And
bottle, a brand new car. Oak tree got in my way. Ooh, that smell.
What, can I make the phone call now, or?
Oh.
What the hell?
I'm doing too much.
Yeah.
What?
By the way, then somebody told me.
Call, man.
I was thinking, what he, Brother Mark.
All you got to do is just hit the thing, man.
I don't know your phone. How are you going to tell me, I need to do this, and this? I ain't never done it.
It works the same as an Android.
I've never messed with this phone.
And then somebody just told me that they did a YouTube of me on Carl Nelson's show, and 22 minutes of it is missing.
All right, hold tight. I'm about ready to connect with the judge.
They took that Dr. Jacqueline Badalore video down. Somebody said something because I watched it live. I listened to it while I was at work.
Hello.
Hello, Judge. Thank God. Yes. Let me merge the phone calls. All right. You there, Mark? Mike? Everyone? I hope. I pray. Hello? See what's going on?
Here.
There's Mark. Everybody's on the line.
All right. Good, good. Let's start the show.
Joe, you on the line?
Here.
Yeah, they're here. Hey, guys. This is the Other Morning Show. I'm True Power's Mine.
I'm Dimebag Dorley.
And this is what we all been waiting for this Saturday. We on the line today. We have Judge Joe Brown and Mark from Anaheim, folks. This will be exciting. Is this turned up, Max?
Yes.
And without further ado, you want to say anything? Would you like to say anything?
No. I'm more of a fan today.
All right. Well, gentlemen, you're both on the line. Questions.
We do got some questions from the audience that wanted to ask you guys some questions, and so we're gonna just...
Who's Judge Joe Brown? Aren't you going to tell the audience who Judge Joe Brown is?
Yeah.
Don't ever assume that your audience knows what you know.
Right.
They know who I am.
Not the young ones, brother.
They know. They're my biggest fans. Anyway, we can go from there.
They may not know who I am.
Well, you tell them who you are.
I already sent them a bio.
All right, go ahead.
All right. We have Mark from Anaheim. You got to pull up that bio I sent you. There you go.
What about the audio? It seems low.
Yeah, well, on the judge's side, it seems a little
Yeah.
low. I'm trying to get to the YouTube page here real quick so I can pull up the questions.
So we got some questions from...
Oh, yeah, I got.
We got some questions from... it's two different things. Some questions from the fans of the show and fans of you guys. So we're just going to just dive right into it. And, you know, it's more about y'all than it is us. They don't want to hear from us.
Well,
So...
man.
I
am not having a tech-friendly day at all. Everything I'm trying to do is just being hindered.
Yeah, it is.
All right.
Good show today.
You got it?
I'm trying to get there. I'm on YouTube at least. All right. This is crazy. Gosh, my...
Okay.
I'm saying we probably should take this inside. Won't hit the birds and stuff.
No, man, you're fine. Just ask them the question.
I don't have any questions yet.
They live. Everybody's live.
Yeah, everybody's live, and we're sitting here saying nothing.
Everybody's live on Facebook.
Right.
Do you see any questions? Are they asking any questions over there? Well, I have a question, gentlemen. It's pertaining to the Civil War that we're facing. I had a conversation with a young man last night. He called me. And, hopefully I gave him the right information. I told him basically to get a shotgun and get a sidearm. Do you think that was correct? I don't think they're on the phone.
You should have added some form of semi-military, semi-automatic rifle mix of the standard military caliber. That would have been what he needed to complete his arsenal.
So like a 9mm or 45?
No, that's the pistol. I'm talking about 223, 5.56 for a carbine or rifle. Especially before they may outlaw.
And that's what, we got to realize. Every population that has been in the 20th century, anyhow, basically de-armed, like the Soviets or the Chinese. You saw what Mao Zedong did or what Stalin did or what Hitler did. Most people actually die at the hands of their duly elected officials, at least in the last century.
Well, the big question is who's going to defend our communities?
Right. And that goes us into the what has happened to men in America, the effeminization of males. Where guys are too in touch with their feelings to do the hard things in life. Like getting up, going to work, being, you know, a man of integrity. You know, you see your neighbor, you ask, you know, help him out or help her out. But people don't want to do that nowadays.
Been taught to the contrary. About 50 some years ago, in reaction to the Vietnam War, there was a thing that was sweeping around amongst the female intelligentsia, and it was war was a man thing. And the way to stop war was to raise boys like they were girls, so they would emote, cry, shout, let it all hang out, instead of being uptight and guided by manly virtue. That kind of emotive display was looked at favorably. However, I think the most dangerous thing going is the apex predator who is not under self-control.
Right.
That was joined by what I call the beta boys, or a lot of people are calling the beta boys, who couldn't make it in the white man's world, but looked white when you looked at them in the mirror. Nowadays, you call them nerds, dorks, dweebs, or whatever it may be. So they joined in on that common cause. Then you had the feminists, starting with a capital F, who just hated men anyway, and thought the whole institution of man-woman relationship was a form of slavery. And then you put the LGBTQ mix in there that they did not call that. They did not call themselves that at the time, but you put them into the mix and you let them take control of the media in Hollywood, and you've got a potent mix for being used for subtle and now not so subtle propaganda to change the masculine paradigm, but it does not work. And you see out of control young predators who are not comfortable with themselves or that hunter that's inside of them, so they get out of control in the hallway and in the hood.
Yes. They become basically, let's just be honest, they become the code for the private prisons. You know, because we know that's where they're going. They're going to a private prison. They're going to work for pennies a day or whatever the rate is.
Well, that's not what the prisons are about. Prisons are not to exploit labor. The whole penal system has morphed into a system to control surplus labor.
Yes.
See, there are not enough jobs to go around in this particular society that will accommodate the expectations of the typical blue-collar, ordinary working person whose IQ, cognitive skills, background, and circumstances do not permit moving in field in terms of what he has to do to earn his living. So to keep Timothy McVeigh type from buying ammonium nitrate fertilizer or doing what this guy did up in Toronto, taking a van, what are you going to do? Van, 10 people and severely injuring 14 others with a common utensil, or doing what McVeigh did with the America's most common fertilizer and blow up a courthouse and bag a whole bunch. I have a saying in the military, bullets kill a lot of people, but only high explosive kills enough. Ammonium nitrate, America's most popular fertilizer, doesn't require any kind of registration or anything to buy it, but it's pound for pound, 1.5 more times powerful than dynamite. So, you know, it's kind of a no-win situation. The real problem is the defaulted, well, not the defaulted, it's the deficient condition of child rearing in this country. And
Yes.
They need to go back to the default position, what worked for thousands of years, which they got rid of in the last 50 years. You throw in that Dr. Spock thing from the late 50s, early 60s about early childhood rearing, which was a new scheme, and that doesn't work because basically the swat on the behind on a kid works a lot better. It fixes his mind better, and it doesn't take an hour and a half to try and beg him to do something like you get from the timeout child psychology thing where you talk about, Junior, please do this, Mama is getting upset. And we have ignorant mothers in the hood who don't need to be mothers because they aren't really qualified for the office.
Right.
And you've got the white world where instead of dealing with one of mankind's most important functions, that is motherhood, they try to de-emphasize it and make it look like it's demeaning. So it's crazy.
By design. By design.
What? These other questions for Mark.
And then you can say, if you want to see it, look at the new Black Pussy movie they had out. Some people call it the Black Panther movie.
Yeah.
If you go through and analyze that movie, you can see most of what's wrong with the situation, even though it's a fantasy based on a non-existent African country.
Right.
But the fight in the end, the war is between men and women. This tribe is a matriarchy. You don't see men in the sciences. It's only the girls. The king is a fool that instead of governing his own country as the sovereign, he runs around playing vigilante in some hyper tight pants with some kind of built-in science technology to make him invulnerable. And he goes around solving penny anti-crime by penny anti-white folk. So it's a waste. You get righteous revolution, third world sentiment from Killmonger, and he's the bad guy. You get utterances from Du Bois, Garvey, H. Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael, Malcolm X. You get uttered by Killmonger. You get the characteristics of a successful revolutionary, whether it's Mao, Lenin, whether it's Fidel Castro, Ho Chi Minh. You see that in Killmonger, but he's a bad guy. He has the balls to say in the end when he's dying, just bury me in the ocean where the brave people jump so they would not be enslaved. And you make him the villain, and you got some little pussy who goes around and decides he's going to be a good house Negro and give all of this technology that puts this mythological African country 500 years in the future, and instead of using it to establish that country's hegemony in Africa and then imposing world peace, they're going to give it to the white folk.
Right. And what do you think they're going to do with that technology? More the same.
Kill them.
I mean, it's a pathetic movie, and we are in there going off and buying costumes and dressing up and then talking about black enterprise. We are complaining and whining about black enterprise, and Viacom's board of directors are getting a missive to explain, not the board of directors, but the board of directors of Viacom are issuing a missive to the stockholders to explain why this Marvel work went to Disney instead of Paramount. Now they're getting explanation that they need Disney and its animation facilities so badly they can't afford to let them fail. And Disney had a $680 million judgment taken against it and ABC, now $800 million. So black folk, guess what, are bailing out Walt Disney, the same racist Walt Disney that funds most of the crazy right-wing activity in this country now through Disney's estate. Used to be the John Birch Society, and now it's every other little crank cause that you can think of. You've got Uncle Remus that they put out, and I remember Zippity Doodah, Zippity A, when I was in elementary school. They taught that all over the country, and that's about some stupid fool slave who was complaining about the Northerners were trying to free him from slavery, where he was so happy-go-lucky.
Yep. Yes, sir.
And then look at it this way: the largest majority black city in America, Memphis, comes out to be the #1 box office for the Black Pussy movie. And then we've got the #1 theater in Memphis for the black folk, known as the Paradiso, considering all of the shows in Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago being the #1 in box office draw. And by the way, it's now the #1 box office draw for action, adventure, superhero stuff in movie history. So just look at what we can do, but we do it for trifling reasons.
Yes.
See,
Yes,
that's the real problem, and the white people have an addition to that too. I am so glad that I will have to give her these kudos, and I met the woman. She'd actually been over to my house with her husband a few times to eat dinner, and that's DeVos, the education secretary. I am so glad that she announced that paradigm shift on the Department of Education's policy relative to alleged sexual misconduct on college campuses, so that you get back with some modicum of due process instead of this witch hunt thing that they've got going on right now. Hashtag MeToo. But what is that supposed to have to do with a fair, impartial, detached, and neutral and independent quasi-judicial proceeding? And see, to show you where this crazy mess is going, there is a concomitant push to make a new crime out there called rape by seduction. In other words, if the woman is wine dined and is gotten aroused and is seduced, so she wants to have sex, that's supposed to be rape by seduction. So rape does not just become forcible rape. So I guess you're supposed to ask, baby, you know, let's go out and have sex tonight. Is it okay? So we can wine and dine. And she's supposed to say on the front end, yes or no. It doesn't work that way in human nature. And what damn fool wants to get away from the way human nature works, except those who don't like it when it goes that way because they don't like the opposite sex too much. Right. And then some of this stuff that's going on right now with the Cosby thing. You have to understand, most of those women give the appearance of having been of the persuasion to be bisexual, now mostly lesbian rather than bisexual, and they had what they call posed remorse. Let's face it, there was a time in there coming out of the late 60s, early 70s, when the operative phrase was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, sex, drugs, baseball, football, basketball, celebrity, whatever it may have been, and they went in there to get high, get drunk, free of charge on somebody else's tab, get interesting drugs on somebody's tab, and to have sex. They came back over and over and over again. See, it's stuff like that that you just don't get the media discussing because they're so shallow, they have not knowledge of these things. Some of those women that were on that cover would walk into a party out in L.A. and they'd have on a see-through blouse and in 30 minutes, everybody in the party and coming back again. And then it didn't work for them.
I'm sorry, Judge. 1 second. We have to call Mark from Anaheim back. Apparently the line was dropped or something.
The number's already in there.
Say again?
Oh, Mark, you're there? Oh, man, this is crazy.
He's there.
So, I thought you had just called me on the phone. I thought we had dropped the line. Okay. Somebody else from California died now. My bad. Party foul.
Is everybody there?
Judge is in the house.
Yeah, Judge is in the house. Mark is in the house.
Okay.
I'm sorry, folks.
Yeah, you
My
need
bad.
to just calm down.
I'm trying to calm down. I'm trying to drink.
I got back to the Bill Cosby thing. I got a question. Like, when I look at the whole Bill Cosby situation, it looked like he had said resources to put mechanisms in place that would have protected him from this courtroom lynching that put him in, probably gonna put him in prison for the rest of his life. Do you think that, because I heard Bill Cosby say, looks like to me that instead of using this money to put mechanisms in place to protect him, he chose to do otherwise, and this is part of the results of that.
Maybe, but you've got a 240-year history of this country using any innuendo against the black man to get rid of him. Typically, if the the rape victim was looking white or was white. And you got that lesbian-looking former women's basketball player or coach or whatever she was, who's obviously gone to the lesbian side. And, you have that other creature, Gloria Allred, who's pushing it on and represents all of them. And they've been getting sort of remorseful for having done what they did. See, that's also part of the thing that's going on back on the East Coast in these universities where they want to make it okay for a girl to say, I want this boy expelled because I slept with him. Now, I'm sorry I did it, but I don't think I should have to look at him when I run into him on campus for the next 3 years, so he should be thrown out of school because I made a mistake. And you see, that's an inherent contradiction. If women are supposed to be equal, it looks rather hypocritical to take the position that women are particularly vulnerable to men. And if they are particularly vulnerable to men needing special protection, that puts them in the place of a child. Children are particularly vulnerable, so they have special protections. But there are restrictions on what they can do and the rights that they can exercise because they are children or they are particularly helpless. If those are some people that have physical challenges and their compensations that they have because they get to park closer to the store. They get certain ramps. They get put on the airplane first. That's their challenge, and that's what the social compensation is that's delivered to them. So when you turn around and you take the position that women are challenged, so to speak, in their dealings with men, and they need special compensations, then you have a problem. Because you see, there's the other way around. Women can turn their wiles on men, and it's a very dangerous thing for a guy. Because face it, I think you guys can attest to the truth of this. You're a lot younger than I am, but the business of most straight guys through most of their lives is acquiring the means and the wherewithal to deal with the pursuit, acquisition, and enjoyment of nookie. Mm-hmm. So, as the sole source and supply of nookie on the planet, women have a thing they can do to humans, and humans have apparently the animal kingdom's deepest sex drive. So it's the thing. So if you're going to talk about the equality of women in all things, then don't turn around and talk about their particular susceptibility to men. I don't get how you can talk about, I went over there and I put this stuff in my mouth and I know what I'm doing over there is placed, and I keep calling back over and over and over again. That reminds me of a rape trial that I participated in where the victim was supposedly raped in the defendant's convertible. And she testified in the middle of the testimony, everybody's jaw hit the ground, when she testified that she decided to say, I need a prophylactic to do this. I'm going to rape you. So she says, I've got one in the glove compartment of my car. So she gets up out of the back seat of the convertible, climbs over the side with only a top on, walks over to her vehicle about 25 yards away, gets the prophylactic out of the glove compartment, comes back, puts it on him so he can continue to rape.
I'm sorry.
Now, that's some of the stuff that actually gets said in the courtroom. I have had people crying, snot running down their noses, talking about how awful it was. And then it comes to be that, well, he said he was going to pay my rent. I was going to fix him. Or in one case, a guy maintained his innocence, and I had to grant him a new trial because what happened? It turned out while this rape was supposedly going on, he was in Germany, of all things, in the United States Army. And his lawyer was an incompetent who didn't know how to get those records from the military. So you see all kinds of things going on. And this woman swore up and down it was him. She'd never forget it. It was high drama. He was walking down the street. He had been discharged from the Army honorably. And he was just walking down the street. And she was driving by and stopped and said, "That's him. I'll never forget it." And it was all a mess. Then it turned out couldn't have been him. He was in the army in Germany.
But she knew. She knew without a doubt. You know, that's the power. A woman can make an
without a doubt.
accusation.
Now, see, the other thing is, too, how many times have you been in a restaurant and somebody at the table says, "Hey, would you grab the waiter? I need some cream for the coffee." And you go, "Wait a minute, which one is the waiter?" And I've been looking at him, you know, up front, up close and personal, and I don't recognize him. And then the other aspect of this trial, if anybody's interested, the citation is 384 U.S. at page 333 from 1966. The case is Sheppard versus Maxwell. It was a U.S. Supreme Court case, and it examined the rights of the freedom of the press under the First Amendment, and compared that to the defendant's right to a fair trial as required by the Sixth Amendment and the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Now, in that case, there was somebody charged with a crime that got notorious with all sorts of public attention paid to it, and he was accused of killing his wife. He denied it, but the Supreme Court held that the conviction had to be set aside because the court didn't properly protect the defendant from the consequences of this undue publicity that was attendant upon the trial of the matter. You see, you've got issues in here. At one point in time, this so-called victim decided that she was going to press criminal charges. They weren't allowed. Then she decided to go after a civil case. Well, the civil judge says, well, since the DA says he won't be proceeding against this, then you, Mr. Cosby, as a defendant, have to give statement for the plaintiff as her witness. This is a civil matter. In a civil matter, the defendant can be compelled to give evidence against himself. He cannot in a criminal case, and he is entitled to assert the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. So what happens is, because the trial judge in the civil matter says, oh, okay, what's going on is, since the prosecution is not going forward, you have no Fifth Amendment concerns, you're ordered to make a statement. He makes a statement. Then you get a new DA who decides to go forward. And now they say, well, okay, the Fifth Amendment situation wasn't there when he made the statement. He was compelled to give evidence against himself in what was at that point an exclusively civil matter. Now we want to use that in a criminal trial. So you've got an admission in any event that he had sex with the woman. He knew who she was. There was no identity question. There was no question as to whether or not it was sex that was involved. He just said it was consensual. The issue is whether or not it was consensual or whether or not it was by artifact of some drug or intoxicant. So what you have is a swearing match. So when you have a swearing match, the situation should be due process again. You get to confront your accusers, and the demeanor, bearing, consistency, inconsistency, the credibility or lack of credibility of the witness becomes that issue in assessing what she's saying as to whether or not it's either the truth, a misconception, a mistake, an honest mistake, or it is in fact la verite. So you have all of these things that got knocked out of this trial, and then you allow 5 other people to talk about nebulous other crimes to do what? You see, you can't ordinarily use proof of other crimes unless there's something in the case that demands it. Like there's an ID question in a robbery, but then again, the same individual was in another robbery an hour before in the same car with the same people, and somebody can make an ID on that one. You can do that, but you see the trend these days is, oh, okay, fine, we need to do this because it's a hot case and I want to get elected because I like my job as a judge. I don't have to work like I did as a lawyer. It's a lot less stressful. I want the paycheck and the retirement benefits, so I'm going to do what the mob wants me to do. And then you've got this hashtag MeToo bit, which what does that have to do with the independent proceedings in a courtroom? But in any event, you've got the case there, Sheppard versus Maxwell, which is still good law. So we tend to forget that. But, there's a lot there going on with the appeal.
Well, what about
we'll see where that goes. But see, this whole thing, there are articles this week on Emmett Till, where the woman who supposedly got molested or assaulted by young Emmett Till, and on her 82nd year, she decides to come clean. She said nothing happened at all.
Right.
Lightly flirted, and I was afraid of my husband who used to brutalize me. We left each other eventually, but see, she said that was wrong with what happened to that boy, and her conscience is bothering her, but he got lynched.
Right. All over a lie.
Yeah, and see, it's this thing where the news media does not give you, we have a breaking story, the police advise, so on and so forth. There was a shooting in South Central, so on and so forth, and that's it, move on. They don't leave it at that. Tommy, what do you think happened? Well, I don't know, Al. What about you, Bill? Well, maybe what happened, so and so. Al, what do you know? Well, maybe that's about right. It could have happened that way. See, they speculated and they make it a game, and they feed into, guess what? This soap opera thing that has been going on for 80 years where, girl, I can't wait till I get home to see what Erica's up to. I got to check out my soaps. I record it. See, right. So it fits into that. And on the SAT and the LSAT, they've even got a new section under logic where it's Susan is first cousins with Caroline. Caroline has married so-and-so who had a child with her, so-and-so, and that child, so and such and such and such, and blah, blah, blah. What is Caroline's relationship to Tommy? Who the devil thinks like that? But I raised hell about it, and I got told, oh, that's the new thing. We want to make it less biased against the female gender, so we took stuff based on soap operas that they would be familiar with and then would be in tune with how they think, so we could test them for logic. Oh, we admit it, the boys don't do well with this. Yeah, because no sane person thinks like that.
No, that you're absolutely correct with that.
So
I'm pontificating on this, but there's a lot going wrong here. Women, I always had the motto that women should be protected and womanhood should be protected and manhood should be promoted.
Yes.
Protecting womanhood, promoting manhood. It's a yin-yang balance. We talked about that the other day, that symbol where you've got a black side and a white side, but they are symmetrical but opposite. Mm-hmm. And one is a big bulb, a drop that tapers into a little tail that matches the big bulb and drop on the other side. So what that symbolizes is that some things one gender can do well and the other gender can do a little bit of. And then on the other end of the spectrum, that gender can do something very well and the opposite gender does a little but not nearly as well. That's that yin-yang balance. And yes, we get out of that because we've got a motive going on here to get rid of manhood. Now, this manhood thing, I say, is like a lifeboat for humanity. Mm-hmm. It kind of hangs around, nothing to be done with it most of the time in today's modern world because everything's so safe, relatively speaking. But when you get a Titanic situation, you certainly need those lifeboats and you need them to work.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. Like that brother Sawyer that disarmed that fool with a AR-15 clone in the Waffle House. And then he did it with his bare hands, but then the police are supposed to protect you. Look what happened down in South Florida. The same kind of weapon was involved, only in this case, we had an armed school security person who went and hid behind a wall. He punked out on everybody, and the first 4 deputy responders hid behind the car until the shooting was over, and their instruction was, if the school, go in, this is what you get paid for, you got to put it on the line. This is the real deal. But see, they punked out, and here's some other dude went after the same kind of weapon, armed somebody with his bare hands.
And he should have been.
Now they're trying to make him look like, oh, he cried. He said, I was terrified. Now they're putting that in. He didn't say I was terrified. They kept trying to press, weren't you terrified? Didn't you feel that? They want you to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they do.
Yep.
Now, Mark, you still there? See if can you check the phone?
Yeah, they're on. They're both still. Hold on.
Still here.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. We were talking earlier today, and you wanted to bring up something about the Martin Luther King shooting, that the judge was involved. I mean, he was the last judge to actually, try that part of that case, I presume. Would you share that with the judge?
Mark, are you there? He was just on the line.
They're blocking, they can't do that.
Yeah. Where's the other line? I only see one.
Then you just heard?
I don't know about what I just heard. I'm just saying I only see one now.
Yeah, I do too.
I hate this. I'm sorry, Judge. I mean, it's always something. It's always something technical around here. Always.
I said, maybe you're getting blocked.
Yes. I mean, I was talking to Mark the other day, and he was telling me about his problems with Facebook. All right. And I was kind of laughing. Oh, yeah, because he's so popular. Well, then after we did the show yesterday, I was trying to show these guys the video I did earlier this week. And lo and behold, it was deleted. It was the video I did with Dr. Jacqueline Badalora. And I'm like, wow, now it just got real for me. Now it's no longer somebody else's issue. It's my issue. Because I did not delete the video. And I'm just so upset. Are we going to call him back?
Yeah.
Something. Watch out for this. I tweet. And by the way, if anybody's listening, it is the real Judge Joe Brown tweeting at Judge Joe Brown TV. That's me.
There you go.
There's some people that refuse to believe that's me. They even claim, well, this other one's more judge-like. Well, it's not me. This is
more judge.
But, I've noticed something. I have been writing the tweet out on the note function of the cell phone, all right?
Okay.
And then there's a way where you can send that tweet to Twitter so it comes out. So I've carefully spell checked the thing on the note that I am going to send to Twitter. And then when it gets to Twitter, there are misspellings in it. And I go back and look what I put in the notes, and it's perfect.
Yeah, they do all that stuff. They manipulate everything.
Let's call him. Yeah, I'm sorry, folks.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, we got you back, brother. All right, we got you back. In the sink. I had just mentioned about Judge Joe Brown's participation in the Martin Luther King.
Do you realize I've been gone for 30 minutes?
No.
And you know why I've been gone for 30 minutes?
Why?
I left you a message on your phone. First of all, who the hell does he think he is to assume that everybody listening to your show know who he is? Oh. There are a lot of people who don't have a fucking clue who the hell Judge Joe Brown is.
What's the problem, brother? I'll tell you who they want to know. For 15 years, including the last 3, I was beating Phil in the ratings every week, Oprah in the ratings every week, and half the time Judy. So I was either the number 1 or number 2 daytime syndicated show. Nielsen said there were more Americans watching me than any other show in a 10-day period. So that's why I know it, and I did a lot of work with black youth and white youth all over the country. I can walk places in America I've never been, and people come running up wanting to get autographs and pictures. They know who I am. You get in front of an audience that consists of millions of people a day, and they know who you are. You go on YouTube, and there are some old shows that have got 6, 7, 8 million hits. So they know who I am. And I'm doing an active campaign thing on YouTube and some other stuff through We All Be TV with Ron Hurd.
Yes, Brother Ron.
Get a lot of stuff with Dick Gregory and myself. So people know who I am. I have not been a newbie. I've been active in this since the 60s. I paid my dues, and people know who I am. I spoke all over the country. I just haven't been covered by the mainstream media, but I don't need anybody to tell me who, what my credentials are. They can listen to what I have to say. If you want to get into academia, I have those myself.
Can I speak now?
Hear them?
Can I speak now? Because I was talking and I got interrupted, and that's my whole point.
Who the hell am I for somebody assuming people know?
I wasn't talking to Judge Joe Brown. I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to whoever just called me back. I didn't even know I was on the air.
Well, you are.
Okay, but he didn't say that, and I wasn't talking to you, so can I finish?
Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you, because what I was telling the brother was I hung up a half hour ago because I listened for a half hour. You asked a question about the Civil War, which is fine, but after 30 minutes, nobody even asked me what my opinion was. All I heard was Judge Joe Brown go on for 30 minutes. And I want to tell you something, Judge Joe Brown. I'm the one who encouraged doing this show today. I'm supposed to be at a movie premiere of a black surfer movie from Africa, and I canceled that to be here to be on the show with you.
Good.
Because wait, let me finish. You're doing it again. Because Dick Gregory and we go way back. And because, except for you, and Dick Gregory, I didn't even recognize anybody else that I would recommend to do something about the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And the guest host today had me under the impression that's what we were going to talk about. Instead, all I said was, would you read my biography? Because maybe I said, well, okay, if Judge Joe Brown wants to go there, fine. I'm not going to assume that everybody listening to the show who knows me. And by the way, I'll tell you something. I run 31 Facebook sites. I sent out a message to thousands of people on my Facebook sites, and they didn't know who Judge Joe Brown was. Sorry to tell you that. So all I'm saying is, all I said was I'd never been on a show before. Before you start the show, you always introduce your guests and never assume that everybody listening to your show knew who the hell you're talking about, because everybody doesn't. And I've been down in the hood for a long time too, Judge Joe Brown. And unlike you, I don't know what background you have in arms and talking about what weapons. I'm a certified FBI range master. I'm a retired Marine Corps infantry officer. I'm a retired LAPD supervisor. I know a lot about weapons too, and some of the stuff you said earlier, I wouldn't agree with. You talk about the John Birch Society, and then you talk about how you love Betsy DeVos. Betsy DeVos is the damn John Birch Society. She is the John Birch Society.
Actually, no.
Yes.
Her husband's the heiress to the cosmetic firm Fortune.
Doesn't change the fact Betsy DeVos is John Birch Society.
Oh, well, I know.
And her brother is Eric Prince, who's in charge of Blackwater now XE. So when you, on the one hand, when you criticize the John Birch Society and come back and talk about you like what Betsy DeVos is doing, Betsy DeVos is destroying the public school system because they don't even call it the public school. They call it government schools. And they want to privatize all public schools.
I'm more concerned with her restoration of due process and what they're doing about on-campus accusations about sexual misconduct.
Well, I'm happy you're worried about that, but when they've destroyed all public schools in this country, that won't be an issue for us because most black folks in this country cannot afford to go to a private school or a charter school.
That's because we haven't exerted political power and taken control of the political process where we live as we should have. That's our fault. It's not good, but that's been going on for 50 years when they came up with racial white parents and kids are telling them what to do, and black parents are saying, I don't want a white teacher doing it. Spread out of the South. It's sick. That's what the country relied upon to get someplace, was free public education. Now, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I know what public education can do. By the way, brother, they've been trying to get you back on the line. It wasn't their fault. They were having difficulties, technical difficulties.
I don't think you even heard what I said.
I heard what you said. You said they went half hour, didn't want to introduce you. They've been having difficulties all afternoon. I've been trying to help them out.
So let me enlighten you since you think you know what you're talking about. I hung up the phone and I watched to see how long it took for them to call me back, and it didn't take them a half hour to find me. I said I was on the phone for a half hour, and they didn't even acknowledge my presence because you had a filibuster. It's like it was the Judge Joe Brown show. So I'm like, well, I've been here for 30 minutes. They didn't ask me, so I'm out of here. As soon as they called, when they realized that I was no longer on the line, they called me back. It took them a half hour to realize that.
Well, they've had problems.
I know all about the problems on the show, but my point to you is this, Judge Joe Brown. You're making me out to be the bad guy here when I was the one who tried to make this happen.
Yeah,
but
be polite about what you do.
When I want to be polite, all I try to do by being polite was suggesting to the host to introduce us to the show, and you started off by letting them know they don't need to do that because everybody knew who Judge Joe Brown was. So I knew where I stood.
Introduce me. You said you wanted.
I'm glad you know the whole world knows you, Judge Joe Brown. Because I tell you what, like I already said to you, I've communicated with thousands of people on my Facebook site, and they don't have a clue to who hell Judge Joe Brown is until I sent them that message and told them to do some research.
Well, let's put it this way. A lot of times, it's best when you don't try to impress somebody with your credentials and let what you say or do form the impression.
It's not about impressing with your credentials. The fact is, a lot of people aren't even going to bother listening if they don't even think you're worthy of somebody to listen to.
Well, that's a matter of opinion, and everybody.
Well, there you go. And I can say the same thing about what you just said.
Well, good.
I've been doing. I'm just going to tell you, Judge Joe Brown, I have not been out here in the trenches for the last 2 years. What I was going to try to talk to you on the show today, because we didn't even get close to it, because I don't know what you did. I sent them an outline of some of the things I wanted to talk about. Tomorrow is the anniversary of the 1992 LA riots. And there's a whole lot of stuff that happened during that riot that's about to happen in this country again because people don't even realize how they got played in 92. I was a part of that. I warned LAPD about since you don't know anything about me because I didn't get to do my bio, I'm the guy who refused to testify in the damn trial of Rodney King. I'm the guy who refused to testify in the O.J. Simpson trial. I've risked my life many times having contracts put on me by LAPD folks. So I'm not some Joe Blow who just come around lately either. But nobody's even heard any of that because all we heard was this weird crap about what kind of guns to buy and all of our problems because the parents ain't spanking their goddamn children.
That's one of the big problems.
That may be one of them, but that's not what we got to worry about because do you know what? This country's getting ready to go off. This country's getting ready to go off, and nobody's going to be worried about their fucking child getting spanked while they're getting shot at in the streets. When you got people in Antioch, Tennessee getting shot, nobody was asking, hey, did that guy get spanked when he was a child?
Well, the problem was he did not get raised right. He didn't have his man trained. One brother did. He was the alpha man. Sawyer, Alpha Phi Alpha, by the way. First to first, service to all, we shall transcend all, manly deeds and scholarship. He upheld the tradition. And the other one was a little punk who didn't have proper man training, even though apparently he had a daddy. But he didn't get it. And by the way, if you want to talk about what's going on, what's happening right now looks to me more familiar with what happened, more similar to what happened in the 60s. Let's talk about the rising in South Central Los Angeles that they didn't call that then back in 1965.
Yeah, that's the one where Dick Gregory was the first person shot during that. I'm very familiar with 65.
Well, I was there in 65. That was interesting. It was a different kind of thing. It was an uprising.
Yeah, and let me tell you about 65. All the plans and all... Let me just make this very simple. In 1965... the so-called rebellion, riots, whatever you want to call it, started from a traffic stop of a highway patrol and a black male. 1992, black male, highway patrol. 1965, first night of the riots, William H. Parker and LAPD were slow to respond because William H. Parker was at a fundraiser, political fundraiser. 1992, LAPD was slow to respond because Daryl Gates was at a political fundraiser. 1965. After the riots, rebellion, whatever you want to call it, John McCone, former CIA director, was the one who sat on the panel for the LA riots. 1992. William Webster, former CIA director. What I'm trying to tell you, Judge Joe Brown, I was trained by these assholes. I know how they operate. They pulled it off in 65. They pulled it off again in 1992, and they're about to pull it off again. And it ain't about spanking your goddamn
Well,
child.
let's put it this way. Brother, in 1965, I was there when it started. My girlfriend lived 3 blocks away from where it happened. I saw the whole thing that night. We went out to see what was going on because it was a warm evening, and we were getting ready to go into college, and we needed some entertainment. So we went and checked it out. So
And what did you just say that contradicts anything I just said?
So it didn't have anything to do with who came in to analyze it.
You're not hearing what I'm trying to tell you. What I'm trying to tell you, folks, is that everything you think you were doing in 65 or 92, when you thought you were fighting the system, they set the system up that way so you would respond in that fashion.
Brother, you have not a clue as to what is going on with this system.
Really? I don't have a clue.
Tell me what the jails are for.
I don't have a... Why? Because
Tell
you
me
think...
what the jails are for.
Why? Because you said earlier...
Tell me what the jails are for.
So now we've gone from 1965 and 1992 to what the jails are for. So, according to Judge Joe Brown, the jails have more... you don't want me to answer the question, or you're going to keep interrupting me while I try to answer the question?
Go ahead.
According to Judge Joe Brown, the prisons have morphed into controlling the surplus labor. Is that not right? Is that what you said? I do listen to what you say, Judge Joe Brown. I listen, but you're not hearing me. Thank you.
What do you
I'm sorry that you asked the question I was able to answer because I do listen to you, but you're not listening to me. But you're not listening to me. Let me explain what.
They heard it.
Okay.
No, I have not okay.
Finish.
No, it's not okay because let me just finish one last thing about 1992 that I told one of the hosts on the show today. In 1991, I'm driving down the 710 freeway in my personal Jeep, and I see all these bright lights on the 710 freeway. And I'm like, what the hell is that going on over there? So me, Mr. Curiosity, I go over there. Now I'm dressed in blue jeans and a T-shirt, but I'm a Marine Corps officer, and somebody who was security there saw my Marine Corps stick and goes, "You're a Marine Corps officer?" Because there ain't many black Marine Corps officers. So they let me in. I go, "Yeah, I also work for LAPD." Hey, come on in. So I'm in blue jeans, a T-shirt. Everybody else is wearing tuxedos, evening gowns. But because I'm LAPD and a Marine Corps officer, they let me in. I don't know what the hell's going on in this place. I'm eating cheese, drinking. I don't like wine, so I drink water. At the end, they have this whole spiel, and then they hand us all little posters. But what I didn't know at the time was that was the groundbreaking ceremony for the proposed Metrolink system in L.A., the red line, the blue line, the green line, whatever. Now, why am I saying this to you, Judge O'Brien and the listeners? So now, let's fast forward 18 months later. You got the 1992 L.A. riots, 29 April 1992. On the third or fourth day of the riots, on the front page of the L.A. Times, there is a map showing you the fire patterns of the L.A. riots. And I'm sitting there going, where have I seen this before? Where? It's all on that goddamn poster for the proposed Metrolink system. So while you're telling me I don't know what's going on, if you follow the fire patterns of 1992, that's where the Metro Rail system is now built. That was done by design. You think I don't know what's going on. You don't even know who I am. I've got intelligence backgrounds on things that you can't even get into.
I've actually heard you before. Go ahead.
So when you say I don't know what's going on and I don't have a clue, I put my life on the line trying to look.
I didn't say you didn't have a clue. You
said that I didn't know what was going on in the system.
I said you didn't know what's going on. I said, but I didn't say you didn't have a clue.
Okay, I'm sorry, the wrong word. Well, while you're saying I don't have a
there being a conspiracy to burn.
Conspiracy? Hey, notice who injected that word into this conversation.
As long as you
and we know what that means.
Well, it's a conspiracy, you say.
Conspiracy means, Judge Joe Brown, is two or more people doing something. You know that. Look at any dictionary.
More than that, but you're talking about burning along the right-of-way for the...
I tell you what, I challenge any of the listeners on the show or yourself to go back and find out that I'm lying. You go back and check the fire patterns and you will find out that and here's the funny thing.
Interesting.
Here's the funny thing. In East LA, the Mexicans were talking, bragging all kind of crap. See, they didn't burn down no East LA. Well, guess what? The Metrolink system didn't go into East LA until 10 years later.
Wow. Well,
I don't come on radio shows and talk about stuff I don't know.
Well,
I talk about stuff that I've been personally involved with. And I'll tell you one more thing, Judge Joe Brown.
Look.
So before we had the CIA.
Point you make, by the way, to say that the right-of-way for the anticipated rail development was, in fact, the site of most of the arson activity. That makes an interesting implication.
Well, I'll tell you more. I'll tell you more. You're a judge. You know damn well black people aren't arsonists. Who are the arsonists in this country, Judge Joe Brown?
A whole bunch of people.
No, come on, Judge Joe Brown. How many black people have you had in your courtroom for arson? Arson is a white boy crime. But all of a sudden on 29 April 1992...
Okay, I take your point that opportunistically somebody said, okay, let's do a little bit of real estate clearance right here so we don't have to tear it down. Let's burn it down so we don't have a problem with coming in afterwards if we want to get that. So, all right, somebody opportunistically decides to take advantage of the moment and burn it down. That happens.
What I'm trying to tell you, folks, is very little in U.S. politics happens by accident. Even Judge Joe Brown would agree with me on that one. And this was designed. What I was trying to tell you was before we ever had the CIA, we had the OSS, Office of Strategic Services.
Very incompetent institution. Very stupid bunch of
perhaps whatever you can say about them, let me just tell you this.
Stupid, dumb little bush.
I'm not here to discuss that. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm trying to tell you is I was invited to an OSS reunion. Now, these people are old enough to be my grandparents. And I thought they were going to whack my ass because I'm like, okay, I've been doing radio shows in L.A. They're pissed off at me. They're going to whack me. So I took my little daughter with me. But when I went to this thing, I get on the elevator when I'm leaving. 3 white boys in suits look at me and go, oh, so you work for LAPD now? I go, yeah. Well, what did you think about the riots? I go, anybody with the brain or IQ of an earthworm could tell they were setting that up from day one because every day on the news, the public got bombarded with anti-police, negative media, and it just pissed the neighborhood off to the point where they couldn't take it anymore. And it wasn't about Rodney King. It was about Latasha Harlins. But when Rodney King, when those 4 cops got, by the way, I refused to testify in that trial. And when they refused to find guilty verdicts in Simi Valley and Rodney King, it was on. And then this is exactly what these 3 white boys said to me in the elevator. We're not done with you yet. Those were their exact words. And they said, you can go back and tell Daryl Gates, we're not done with you yet. So what I'm trying to tell the listeners out there, and what I was hoping to share on this show today, since tomorrow is the anniversary, while you think you're out there fighting the system, you don't realize many times the system sets up a situation that will cause you to react in a certain fashion, and then you get exactly what you demanded from the system. Because you're from L.A., Judge Joe Brown, and one of the things that I did not want black folks in L.A. to do was to get rid of the city charter. Get rid of Daryl Gates? Fine. Don't get rid of the city charter. When they got rid of the city charter, and now we had a black chief like Bernard Parks, because we no longer have a city charter, the mayor got rid of the black chief that we wanted as a LAPD chief. Because folks didn't realize when they thought they were fighting the system, they did exactly what the system wants. Now, if you have a corrupt mayor, that mayor can fire the chief of police.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you brought Chief Parker in there back in the 50s to end the corruption, they gave him a life or good behavior contract, and the chief who became the chief was in life or good behavior.
Hey, brothers, I'm loving this because Judge Joe Brown is bringing up stuff that they need to have all listeners here.
Yes.
Judge Joe Brown, who was responsible for Parker becoming chief?
Well, what had happened was you started getting an immigration into Southern California from the South, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, et cetera. It was a good life. And when you got to Los Angeles, they looked at the Central Basin. That's that area ringed by the mountains. They saw Jews and Asians and Mexicans, and that wasn't what they were used to seeing. So what effectively transpired was that the police department wound up getting control over City Hall for a long time.
That's correct. No argument for me on that one because they were dirty as hell under Wharton. I'm sorry, under the mayor Shaw, Frank Shaw.
Yeah, and then they had what they call the Zoot Suit riots out there somewhere in the early part of World War II, where military trainees in Los Angeles were attacking Mexicans and blacks wearing zoot suits because they looked like they were alien to them, and there were big problems that the Germans and the Japanese picked up on and were using for propaganda purposes, and then the military hierarchy had to come in from D.C. and clean that mess up. But L.A. has always been a place that's got racial problems. Now, I'm not attacking you, brother. It's just you came in.
But, brother, you didn't answer my question. Brother, you didn't answer my question. I'm asking again. Who was responsible for putting William H. Parker in LAPD chief's office?
They came in to deal with the corruption that they had with the mob and some other people who were unsavory going around paying off LAPD who were on the take.
So, since I'm somebody who doesn't know what's going on in the system, let me enlighten you and the listeners. You ever heard of Hattie McDaniel? You ever heard of Hattie McDaniel? Have you ever heard of Hattie McDaniel?
Yes, vaguely I remember the name.
Okay, well, you're saying vaguely, this is my whole point. Because you should know this name because she's the first black to ever get an Academy Award, and she's the black woman in the movie Gone with the Wind. So not everybody might know.
I don't watch those kind of movies in the entertainment industry.
What I'm just saying, brother.
The entertainment industry is generally an irrelevancy.
My point, brother, is she's the first black person in the U.S. to get an Academy Award, but not everybody knows her name, not even you, and maybe
she
not
was
everybody.
The one wearing the Aunt Jemima figure wearing.
Yeah, I understand that, but I understand, brother. But all I was trying to show you was this.
What did she do outside of that?
Okay, my point to you is just like everybody doesn't know who you are, you didn't know who Hattie McDaniel was by me.
She was. I just want to get a context.
All right, I'm just going to get to my point. Hattie McDaniel, since you asked the question, since you're from L.A., you remember the black newspaper in L.A., the Black Eagle?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, anyway, it was Hattie McDaniel and the prominent blacks in L.A. who put William H. Parker into Parker Center. You don't know that.
That's new to me.
And that's why I try to came on the show today, because I share information where people think they know what's going on, but they really don't, because I was inside the system. What happened was LAPD was so corrupt, just like Judge Joe Brown said. So what they did was they brought in an outside chief, a Marine Corps general. My mentors were OSS and World War II Nazis. This Marine Corps general was OSS. He came up from Camp Pendleton, came to LAPD. He's the one who cleaned LAPD out, but because of the city charter, being an outsider, he could not be the permanent chief. So the black community, led by Hattie McDaniel from Gone with the Wind fame, and other prominent blacks who lived... Oh, by the way, Hattie McDaniel was the first one to buy a house south of Central, because you know what that term means, because in the old days, niggas didn't belong in that part of town. So all that area today that we call Southwest Division that's over there by USC, Hattie McDaniel was the first one to buy a house there, and she had to go to court and sue to get a house over there. But anyway, Hattie McDaniel and the black community decided all these LAPD chiefs that were up for the chief spot were corrupt. The only person on that list that could not be bought off by the mob run Hollywood, was William H. Parker. Now, William H. Parker agreed he would start promoting black folks on LAPD. And because the general from Camp Pendleton couldn't be the permanent chief, Wharton is his name for anybody who wants to Google it, General Wharton, he had to leave. Parker became the chief. Parker was only number 3 on the list. He didn't even come in the top 2. But because he was known for being OSS connected, he was known for not being able to be bought up by the mob, they made him the chief. In fact, for you folks out there who like Star Trek, Mr. Spock is William H. Parker. You don't know that, but the guy, Gene Roddenberry, he was William H. Parker's speechwriter because he was an LAPD sergeant. So I love it when people talk about Spock and say they held chops, because Mr. Spock is William H. Parker. But anyway, I digress. My point to you is, William H. Parker, of course, he reneged on his plan because he was planning on making Tom Bradley the first deputy chief on LAPD. And I know you know who Tom Bradley was. After all, you guys are fellow alumni.
The neighborhood I grew up in.
Yeah, and he's a fellow alumni of yours from UCLA.
Yes, and he used to have regular meetings with the grown men in my neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Once or twice every couple of weeks. so that they could take care of business in the neighborhood.
Well, the sad thing was, and I don't know I've been trying hard, brother Judge Joe, but I can't find out. But somebody stabbed Tom Bradley in the back. Tom Bradley was up and coming, was moving up the ladder. He did a community relations meeting, and till this day, I can't verify if it's true or not. But whatever the case was, somebody in that meeting was spying for Parker. He went back to Parker. Now, I was told it was lied, but I can't verify it. But he lied to Parker and said that Bradley badmouthed LAPD to the black community. Once he did that, that's when Parker's career got screwed.
Well, he was always bad-mouthing LAPD to the black community.
Well, that's good. That's good to know, because you would know. I wouldn't know. So what I'm just saying,
I heard him several times. Like I said, he patrolled the neighborhood I grew up in.
Oh, yeah, because back in those days, all blacks had to work one division. You know what division that was, right?
What happened is that he went through UCLA, went through athletics, ran the high hurdle.
Track star extraordinaire.
He was in for Riots.
Yes, sir.
He passed law school, and then they did a thing in California where everybody that was a Korean veteran and had finished the law school out there was waved into the bar. He had been trying to become a cop, so once he passed the bar and was sworn in as a lawyer, then they hired him to ride around in the squad car.
Correct.
Yeah,
and back in those days, for those folks who don't know this, if you were black, you had to work Newton Division. But go ahead, brother. I'm sorry.
Well, Newton Division is what it is. But LAPD
right.
has always been a bunch of racist scoundrels as far as
absolutely
those of us who grew up there.
Absolutely. Still is, by the way, but go ahead.
Parker was from Alabama. And
yes, sir.
I know LA's been surprisingly to a lot of people racist. I can remember when you did not go through Inglewood unless you were working for somebody and be there after dark. I know when you went to Anaheim, if you were there after sundown, you had all kinds of problems.
Absolutely. In fact, it's funny you mentioned Inglewood because, see, Inglewood's not actually in the city, but the same thing was true in Westchester.
Yeah,
and Westchester is in the city.
Yeah, Inglewood police was separate from everybody else. That's the same thing with View Park, which was a county enclave up there near Baldwin Hills. There's all kinds of stuff crazy about LA.
Yes, sir.
I'm not trying to down it. It's like you came on kind of in a challenging way, but I'm interested in what you got to say. I find the information informative. You'll fill in a few blanks I had about what was going on in LA. Okay. And I can see your point about somebody opportunistically saying if they're going to ride down here, let's burn down these corridors so we have a much easier thing we'll have.
Gentrification. We used to call, remember, brother, we used to call it urban renewal, Negro removal, but now it's gentrification.
Well, they did that in 65, too. People were standing out in front of the good businesses, whether it was Korean, Jewish, or white or black, and saying these guys treat everybody okay, don't burn it. Didn't get
yes,
touched.
Sir.
A lot of other places got burnt down.
Yes, sir.
They had to call in the National Guard and ran LAPD out of there. So for several months, a year and a half, LAPD didn't come in there unless they were riding 4 deep, maybe 5 deep in the squad.
I hope you brothers are listening to what Judge Joe Brown's saying, because what he just said right now is 100% accurate. White boys on LAPD were so scared, they would not even come in there if they didn't have 4 cops right. And by the way, if you don't know this, back in those days, LAPD didn't have shotguns. When the 65 riots, civil unrest, rebellion, whatever you want to call it, they had to borrow shotguns from other departments. As Judge Joe Brown just said, these white boys were so afraid to come into the hood that they were riding 4 deep, all of them carrying shotguns. But I'm sorry, brother, go ahead.
Yeah, they wound up getting those Ithaca Model 37.
There it is.
Disconnectors.
There it is.
So they can hold the trigger down and pump rapidly and pump
there it is.
Out of buckshot. Yeah, I remember when they did all that, see. The problem with all of that is that basically we do the thing we usually did. There were a lot of people who were informants in the black community, a lot of people who were doing what we call pimping the revolution for their own purposes. And by the time Tricky Dick got elected in 1968 and Reagan got in Sacramento about the same time, everything started going downhill.
And so for the brothers and sisters out there listening to the show, and white folks and brown folks and yellow folks, what Judge Joe Brown just alluded to was a program called COINTELPRO. But I'm sorry, brother, go ahead.
Well, yeah, COINTELPRO was one thing, and they had some even on the more basic level. People that were selling drugs and were about to get busted that turned everybody else in to save themselves.
Hey, we still got that. You just described Al Sharpton. Sorry.
Al Sharpton's got another thing. He does a bend over thing. He was He was James Brown's boyfriend for a long time. But that's
you had to go there. Come on, Judge. Your last name is Brown. My last name is Brown. James Brown. I'm from South Carolina, man. You know, he's one of my distant cousins, but I ain't going to deny what you did.
Oh, yeah. But in any event, there is that. See, one of the things what I'm talking to you about is
yes, sir.
We're trying to deal. These guys want to get some solutions to some of these problems.
Yes.
If you have a certain kind of insight, I looked at something trying to put together a big wheel so you know what buttons cause what to go off and what's connected to what. There's no conflict here.
Yes, sir.
Basically, what I do, by the way, not to throw my credentials out, because there's a certain segment of the audience that I'm trying to get to that does not want credentials. That turns them off. Walking around with a 3-piece suit on or 2-piece suit and a tie, they get bent out of shape. But if you can hang with them after dark, then they listen to you.
Yes, sir.
So
I see them in Savoy magazine. But go ahead, sir.
I try to do that on a general basis. Now, other thing back on this one.
Yes, sir.
Right now, we've got a situation that looks very analogous to the 1960s. I've had a theory that America works on a 50-year plus 5
Absolutely.
cycle,
Absolutely, brother.
Plus 10 cycles. So what we're running into is 100 years ago, we got a lot of white riots that were race-oriented. Ago, we got a lot of other kind of riots that were race-oriented, but not so much where the white people got out in the streets and got to rioting. Right now, the thing that these young brothers that are putting this radio show on right now are going to have to deal with is that in about 30, 35 years, America is no longer going to be a majority white country.
There it is.
Going to have all kinds of pushbacks, and you can see it here in Memphis. In the last 7 to 8 to 10 years, white people have taken basically all of the important offices in this area, even though for the city of Memphis, they're only 19.1% of the registered voters.
In fact, brother, before we started the show today, what I told the host, I said, you all don't realize, but Jojo Brown's in Memphis. That is the only county that's not red in the entire state of Tennessee.
That's right. I'll show you, but the problem is they control nothing. Right now in the county here, only 23.9% of the registered voters are white. But the black folk can't control anything. We've got a mayor's race coming up next year. By design, there is no runoff in that race. And by design, it's nonpartisan. So what's been happening is we get 4, 5, 6 blacks running for the position and 1 white, and he slips in. Or we have the 9th congressional district, which is overwhelmingly Democratic. So what we have every time a primary situation comes up, we've got 1 white Jewish guy, and he usually has 5 or 6 black opponents or 4 black opponents, and he becomes the Democratic nominee, and he gets in.
Because, wait, brother. Let me explain this to the listeners. So, folks, listen to what Judge Joe Brown is telling you. He gets in because that's who the Democratic National Committee decides to endorse instead of the brothers who's running against him. And they did the same damn thing when Hillary Clinton should have lost to Bernie Sanders, but the Democratic National Committee decided, no, they're going to support Hillary Clinton no matter what hook and crook they're going to do to get it. But I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Oh, well, anyway, that's another story. That whole super delegate thing was
there it is.
So that they could get Hillary Clinton. And by the way, if you want to talk about Hillary, I recall her, I'm a little bit older than she is, but I recall her when she was in high school making a national name for herself, going around in the 12th grade campaigning for that
Barry Goldwater girl. I'm a Barry Goldwater girl.
Right. And
there it is.
66, 67, I was with the UCLA BSU. We sent a delegation to Chicago because Bernie Sanders was head of a core chapter there.
That's correct. And back then, by the way, I don't want to interrupt you, brother, but this is important for the younger folks. Folks, listen to what Judge Joe Brown is saying, because back then, Bernie Sanders was already down with the civil rights movement, while Hillary Clinton was a Barry Goldwater, John Birch Society girl. But I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
It's worse than that. See, they were putting Sanders in jail because he was leading a charge to desegregate student housing for the University of Illinois.
There it is.
Chicago and in the surrounding suburbs. Now, Hillary Clinton was back for the summer vacation with her racist parents, and she was out there trying to campaign to keep that the student housing and the suburb where her parents lived segregated. And then we get her again coming around campaigning in 1968 when she was chairwoman of the Young Republicans at Wesley College, campaigning for Richard, I am not a crook, Tricky Dick Nixon.
There it is.
Also campaigning for Ronald Reagan out in California.
There it is.
She's been on the wrong side for a long time, and I guess until Bill started sticking her, and that became a matter of convenience once she got to Yale Law School, where I got. They tried to recruit me, but I didn't want to go there. It was 5 feet on snow on the ground when they brought me there to talk about it, but I decided to stay at UCLA. But see, the bottom line is that woman has never been our friend, but we get delivered. Missy Clinton is so good. And what's wrong with Sanders? Well, what the hell is wrong with Sanders? Nothing. Except the other thing that you need to understand about what he was saying when he was campaigning about where are the transcripts. The deal is not what she would have been saying, but what she didn't say. Because she got paid, she reported approximately $13 million generated by Goldman Sachs on a speaking circuit, but we find from the leaked emails that it was 26 million instead of 13, and nobody's talked about you have to make that report under penalties of perjury, federal perjury.
Okay, brother Joe Brown, before you go on, so for the listeners out there, there's always a meaning to my madness. I was trained by these folks, and I purposely allowed them to call me back today so I can get Judge Joe Brown to say these things because he has more authority. So let me just enlighten you on a little back on my background. One of my mentors, Naval Intelligence, his son worked in the law firm with Bill and Hillary Clinton. When Bill Clinton was elected president, I turned down the opportunity for both a White House fellowship and a Fulbright scholarship. And for Judge Bro, I know you know this, Judge Joe Brown. For other folks, Bill Clinton, he was a Fulbright scholar. When the earthquake happened in Haiti, I was offered $18,000 a month to go down to Haiti as an advisor, and I turned their blood money down. Now, I know Judge Joe Brown already knows this. Who got most of that money that went to supposedly for the earthquake relief in Haiti?
That Clinton,
the Clinton Foundation.
There it is. And worse, there's gold in Haiti. Guess who has the contract to mine the gold in Haiti? Hillary's brother.
Well, it's not surprising. If you're talking about some other stuff, let's go back to DeVos and her brother-in-law who has Blackwater.
No, not brother-in-law, brother. Eric Prince. Yeah. You have to understand, sir, I train Navy SEALs, so I know who Eric Prince is, and I run Navy SEAL Facebook sites, but go ahead, brother.
Okay, hold on. Let's go back to another thing.
Yes, sir.
Betsy DeVos gets her money because her husband is the heir to the Mary Kay cosmetic fortune.
That's correct. But the fact is, Betsy DeVos' husband is in the same political bed of the Mercer family, and they're the ones that's promoting Brexit along with trying to set up the United States for a civil war. But go ahead, brother.
Hold on. I'm making another connection here.
Yes, sir.
Has, to a great extent, been subsidized by Halliburton.
That's correct.
Halliburton's connection is not Dick Cheney, who is the CEO. Halliburton's connection to all this is George Herbert Walker, Uncle Herbie to George Herbert Walker Bush.
Absolutely.
Great Uncle Herbie to George Walker Bush. Now, next
I'm sorry, brother.
Uncle Herbie set up or helped George Herbert Walker Bush set up Zapata Oil, which was a thing where the senior Bush president would take money advanced by financier Uncle
From
Herbert.
Venezuela.
Yes, and what he would do is he would buy a percentage of the mineral rights of people who own property around what was going to be brought in as oil strikes.
That's correct.
Buy 10, 15, 25% of their mineral rights for cash, and he'd get that income. He also, on behalf of the whole Bush family, set up Zapata Offshore Oil, Inc., which is chartered in Kuwait.
That's correct.
Interesting connection. You also have to stop thinking about Barack Obama and think about Lolo Soetoro, who did many a joint venture with Halliburton and Enron back when. And Lolo Soetoro is Barack Obama's stepfather / adopted father.
That's correct.
Raised him. So the interesting connection is that the Bushes and the Soetoros have been long-term family friends. So when you see Barack Obama coming in as president after President Bush, you have to understand that the Obamas and not the Obamas, but the Soetoros and the Bushes were old family friends going back years, including before Barack was born.
That's correct. And my brother, just give me a second here. So for the listeners out there, because Judge Joe Brown doesn't know this, I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. My Barbara Prescott Bush just died. She went to school at Ashley Hall in Charleston. So I know these folks. Daddy Bush, as I call him, Judge Herbert Walker Bush, he and I belong to many of the same organizations. And when Barack Hussein Obama was nominated by the Democratic Party in 2008, this is what I specifically stated. Vote for change my ass. Barack Hussein Obama is the best Republican that the Democratic Party has decided on since William Jefferson Clinton. So I just want to share this, folks, before you go on, brother. When it comes to the Bush family and Zapata Oil, just to give you an idea how deep this is, and I think Judge Joe Brown will agree with me on this, I'm not going to assume, democracy died in this country on 22 November 1963. That was the day Kennedy was assassinated. The person who gave the FBI the name Lee Harvey Oswald was a businessman named George Herbert Walker Bush. We go back a little further. On the day that Kennedy was assassinated, the mayor of Dallas was Cabell. His brother was the general who sabotaged the invasion of the Bay of Pigs. So, Judge Joe Brown, do you remember what the name of the ships were that the U.S. used in the Bay of Pigs?
I don't, but I know that's some connection with that family. But you can
exactly. You mean like the Barbara?
Yeah.
And whose wife's name is Barbara?
Yeah, but you can go back further than that.
But I'm just saying, if you go back and look at the name of the 3 ships involved in the Bay of Pigs, they all go back directly to George Herbert Walker Bush and Zapata Oil. So I only say this because I just want the listeners to know every single thing that Judge Joe Brown just said is 110% accurate. I know.
We go back a little further than that.
Yes, sir.
And Rockefeller.
Yes, sir.
George Herbert Walker Bush's grandfather, who was
Prescott.
the father of no, not Prescott.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said father. Prescott's the grandfather. I'm sorry.
Father.
Yes, sir.
That Bush was hooked up with an iron foundry in Ohio.
That's correct.
That Bush was interesting because after World War I, Rockefeller and Carnegie acquired most of the German defense industry.
That's correct.
Industry. And they had that Bush running as the international president of the consortium. It's
That's correct.
That the Bush family got checked every year through World War II from this German armaments conglomerate, and we're supposedly at war with them.
That's correct.
The family for the last 150 years has been into foreign intelligence, paper entrepreneurship, and energy development. Paper entrepreneurialism is when you buy off the assets of a company, and you sell it off for profit rather than operating the company. That's
there
what
it is.
they're doing. So for a long time, they've been supplying information to the U.S. government, and in return for that, some of their interests did not get attacked during World War II.
Well, not only that, brother, what happened was when the State Department went after Prescott Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush joined the Navy, became the youngest pilot at 19, just to reclaim the family's honor and fame. But folks out there, when you talk about Compton, California, and all you ever hear about is the drive-by shootings and Eazy-E and NWA and the Crips and the Bloods, guess who had oil, pumping oil out of Compton, California back in the 1950s, Judge Joe Brown?
Yeah, they were Enron and
and also George Herbert Walker Bush. In fact, one of the Bush's sons was born in Compton, California.
Yeah, that's the Bush family. They've had
There it is.
interest in oil.
In fact, so I just want to say this before you go on, Judge Joe Brown. So in 1992, you had Bill Clinton, George Herbert Walker Bush, and Ross Perot running for president. What most folks didn't know was they were all related by blood. And by the way, Hillary and Donald Trump are related by blood. They were all related by blood in 1992. And at the time, right before the LA riots in Compton, guess who owned 98% of the municipal bonds in Compton? Ross Perot.
Well, no doubt.
So what I'm just trying to tell the listeners out there, and that's why I wanted to do this show with Judge Joe Brown today, because he and I have never done a show before. But I was groomed, I was mentored, I was trained by these folks. So I have a totally different background, but I have an insight. But my insight is not the same as Judge Joe Brown, because he grew, well, I don't use the term grew up because I got older, but I never grew up. Judge Joe Brown came up in L.A. He knows about Bunchy Carter. He knows about what happened with United Slaves and the Black Panthers and what was going on in Compton back in the 60s and early 70s. And Ron Karenga, oh my God. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kwanzaa.
His name is Ron Everett. When I first met him, he was student body president at LA City College, and he had a Jamaican accent. He shaved his head because his hair is long and wavy, and he's got interesting colored eyes, which is why he wears those shades all the time. So switching from a Jamaican accent to that, but black man needs to know. I remember, my line will teach you. You know, that fake thing. By the way, I won't celebrate Kwanzaa because
hell no.
He started in 1966 in that park, right there in Lamert Park.
That's correct.
On Crenshaw Boulevard, to get black people to come in there and talk so he could better inform on them.
The seven-headed snake?
Yeah, so that's bottom line is, see, that's another thing that we get run on us that's tricky. But a point back to this whole establishment that you get.
Yes, sir.
Is I was going to connect that up with my experience having made a lot of money with this show and having lived for 10 years in Aspen, Colorado.
That's where all the New World Order think tank schools are.
Well, it's interesting when you are around a bunch of people who do not have to ask what something costs before they say, I'll take 2 or 3 of them.
There it is. If there's a price on it, you can't be here because you can't afford to buy it.
Well, yeah, but one guy in particular had a problem. He was developing some hotel accommodations, and he got into a problem, and he was short $52 million. So I can't tell too many details because I consulted with him on this, but I was astonished. Within 9 days, he got people to raise the $52 million that he needed to complete the project.
Oh, yeah.
Which is an interesting thing. We think in terms of a few thousand here and there to buy a car. And 52 million you need it within 10 days to complete what you need to complete on something. But that's another story.
Well, hang on, brother, before you go on, for the listeners out there, trust me when I tell you this. I know what Judge Joe Brown's talking about because some of my mentors, that's where their home base was. So while people in this country sit here, especially white folks with their white supremacy crap, and talk about the U.S. Constitution, where Judge Joe Brown was living, very close to where he was in Aspen, there's an organization called the World Constitution and Parliament Association. And that feeds into all these other globalist groups, some of them I was a member of. And I'll just tell you straight out, folks like Jesse Jackson is a member of many of them. And they don't look at the U.S. as a country or any other country. They are looking at a world government. But it's amazing how many of them are headquartered out of Aspen, Colorado. But I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
It's a good place to play. It's great.
There it is.
And it's green in the summer. You go for the winter and come back for the summer. But
that's right. And since I'm a surfer and a skier, I was traveling in the circles with these white folks that go to Aspen during the wintertime and decide what they plan on doing with your life. But I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
It's interesting who you meet there. You'd be surprised. But bottom line is on this whole thing is that most of what you hear from the Democratic Party and from the Republican Party is basically nonsense.
Yep.
This is of the rank and file.
Yep.
The Republicans get in this rah right-wing stuff, and the Democratic Party gets into who pisses in the girls' bathroom. And you get nothing out of it because the boogeyman in all of this is Goldman Sachs.
There it is. And I just have to tell you this, brother. When Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp, now I taught thousands of cops around the world, but I was an instructor at LAPD Academy for 10 years. And one of my LAPD recruit classes, actually long before Trump, had a T-shirt called about drain the swamp. So I use that now to remind folks. Donald Trump ain't going to drain a damn thing. In fact, if you notice, Donald Trump has surrounded himself with Goldman Sachs folks because they rule. You step out of line, Goldman Sachs will take you down. But I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, they have a lot of TV commercials, and the thing of it is, if you look at the commercials, what are they advertising? What product? None. But deal on that. I'll make a prediction with Trump.
Yes, sir.
I'll make it again. He's not really a Republican. He co-opted their party.
That's correct.
There's a political tactic you can engage in, which is not common in this country, but it is other places, is you give the party you've subsumed everything they think they wanted.
Exactly.
Everything they dream of, you give it to them. And then what you do is you carefully and calculatedly get rid of them. And you set up a smoke screen that looks like they and you can't get along with each other. So when you fire them, you keep removing each one from the locus of power and you start gathering it in your own hands. It's what Stalin did. It's what Hitler did.
Okay,
and
brother, before you go on, so listeners out there, let me explain this because Judge Joe Brown just said a lot. What I stated earlier, when you think you are fighting the system, you are doing exactly what the system wants you to do. Judge Joe Brown just told you Donald Trump is not a Republican. I've known about Donald Trump for years. I was born in Manhattan, and I'm retired from LAPD. I supported LAPD's celebrity golf tournament for years. When Donald Trump opened his golf course in Rancho Palos Verdes, I refused to go to his golf course because I know he's in bed with the mob. I know he's a racist bastard. And the only reason I even give Donald Trump any credit because I'm a member of International Who's Who. And it was Ivana Trump who sponsored me to become a member. But once he started beating her, cheating on her, raped her, I don't give him a pass anymore. But I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, back to the focus of this thing.
Yes, sir.
You have 5 principles out there that deal with what happens in the political world. Caesar said one of them 2,000 years ago. If you give the mob bread and circuses, feed them and entertain them, they won't care what gets done.
Correct.
You have Machiavelli, who said the oppressed will submit to their own oppression and encourage it if you give them a chance, however slight, to become oppressors themselves.
Yes, sir.
You've got another thing Joseph Goebbels said, you tell a lie one time, it's
Yeah.
a lie. You tell it 1,000 times, it's the truth. Tell a
That's
lie
correct.
loud enough to get anyone to believe it. I say one of our problems right now is the news media has morphed from an information service into an entertainment function.
Yes.
And that has given it the position of taking this, shall we say, artistic license with reality, so it becomes historical fiction rather than accurate recitation of factual matters. It becomes speculation and all kinds of other stuff.
Yes, sir. Now, before you go on, Judge Joe Brown, before you go on, so for the listeners out there who may not understand what Judge Joe Brown just said, back in the 80s, there was a movie called Network. Everything Judge Joe Brown just told you is visually described in the movie Network, where for the first time, the news no longer provided you with information. It had to compete now with the entertainment for ratings to survive in the news networks around the world. And if you don't know this, right now, 6 corporations control 97% of all the news you see in the United States. But I'm sorry, brother, go ahead.
Well, that's when CNN got into the mix, and then Fox and the rest, and they had 24/7 news. And there's not that much news during the day unless there's a war going on to cover. So they want to make it entertaining, so you stay tuned. Now, Lincoln came up with the penultimate statement on it. He said, you can fool most of the people most of the time, some of the people all of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time.
Correct.
And that last third prong of what he said that everybody depends on. The next thing that is a problem with what we are facing today is that most people in the world are type 1 thinkers. They're
there it is.
They don't have IQs that high. I'm sorry, but that's the problem.
It's true.
They don't have cognitive skills, and they look at things in terms of, if only we had fearless leader, he could make everything all right.
And we will worship the ground he walks on.
Right. So he doesn't have to say anything, prove anything. He just happens to, all he has us that he's with us. That's what Trump does.
Hell yeah, because right now, if you listen, Hillary might call them the deplorables, but let me just remind the listeners of this. The majority of white men in this country who voted in 2016 voted for Donald Trump. The majority of white women in this country who voted in 2016 voted for Donald Trump. And they can't get over the fact that we put a nigger in the White House. Now, they won't come out and tell you this. They know that Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about them because most of them are poor white trash, but at least they're not niggers.
Well, and that's even a question as to whether Barack Obama had that qualification.
You mean like when they said that Herman Cain is more black than Obama?
Well, bottom line is, on Obama, is the only American relatives he has descend from a line who fought the Civil War is officers for the Confederacy.
That's correct. And folks, listen, what Judge Joe Brown just said to you is absolutely correct. And remember, I'm from Charleston, where the War of Northern Aggression, the Civil War started. He's telling you the absolute truth.
Okay, now back to the point. He grew up in a situation where he was the only person of color and one of the richest people in the group, in a group of very civilized kids who went to school as pampered poodles. That's his
correct.
entire career. That high school he went to in Hawaii, the tuition for that high school for the year, without including room and board, when he went, was $45,000 a year. I almost sent one son of mine, the oldest one I have, who's a problem, there 20 years ago, and I didn't. But at that time, the tuition was $95,000 a year, not including room and board. But that's the kind of school he went to. So he does not have our background. He did not arrive in mainland U.S. until he was 21 when he entered as a freshman in college. He wound up getting a job that was with one of Daddy's firms in Chicago, lived on the Loop downtown in a high-rise. It was very expensive. He went to law school when he was 29 years old. He was on law review at 30, not 23. which is a maturation factory. He was carefully groomed. They put him in the neighborhood, sent him to Reverend White's church so he could learn to speak colored. And what he was doing was trying to get these properties that had been homesteaded to people in that black area that Chicago was trying to get redeveloped. So
there it is. And now, Judge Joe Brown, before you go on, wait, Judge Joe Brown, so listeners out there, listen to what Judge Joe Brown is telling you.
Hold on. That's the point where they, in this specious book he has, that's supposed to be the community organizing. What he was doing was going out and getting the black community amenable to the idea of selling their property to a client of the firm who wanted to develop it. That's what he did.
Yes, sir.
So,
but brother, before you go on, I just want to tell listeners, listen very carefully what Judge Joe Brown just told you, because when Bernie Mac from Chicago started doing his stand-up comic and letting people know who Barack Hussein Obama was, and he said exactly what Judge Joe Brown just said, all of a sudden he died in a hospital from a BS viral infection. But I'm sorry, brother.
well, here's the other thing. If you want to check out what Barack Obama is about, look up his voting record as reported by the Heritage Foundation.
Yes, sir.
That's a crank right-wing think tank.
There it is.
2.5 years he was in the U.S. Senate. They gave him their third highest rating for
There it is.
conservative voting.
I hope you're all listening.
So
He's
they
right.
gave it an 8, a 94 out of 100 on their scale, and the top man was 95, and the next one was 94 plus, just a little above Barack. He had the lowest voting record in the U.S. Senate, but he voted for more conservative bills, according to them, than all but 2 other senators. So he was a strong supporter. Barack Obama's so-called Obamacare was drafted in 2000.
From Mitt Romney.
No, it wasn't Mitt Romney. It was senior Republican senator, U.S. senator from the state of Tennessee, Dr. Bill Fritz.
That's cool. That's good. Yeah,
Dr.
that's cool.
Fritz family founded Blue Cross, Blue Shield, etc. So in 2003, when he was the senior Tennessee Republican senator, he drafted it. He became Senate Majority Leader for the Republican Party. It had passed, but Barack Obama got it passed, or his administration got it passed in 2010. Now, you remember a few months ago this debacle going on about the Republicans talking about what they were going to do to Obamacare. And then when the senators got behind closed doors, they hemmed and hawed and did nothing. Essentially, what seems to have happened is that they discovered that it was one of their guys who put it together, not Obama, and too many people had donated to their campaign.
Right.
Now, the real thing that's going on between Trump and the Republican Party in terms of its hierarchy is that, see, Trump is real deal wealthy man who runs various businesses. That's the Republican ideal. The typical Republican rank and file thinks he's going to win the lottery next week and become a filthy rich multimillionaire.
Yeah, right.
So all of the rest of these Republicans are wannabes who come from essentially middle-class backgrounds who want to make a large amount of money, and they're getting a small amount from their politics. For example, Killary Clinton was married to someone 20 years with another 4 stuck in there. You'd say 24 years, governor of the 3rd lowest paying state in the union, Arkansas, in terms of what they paid as governors.
Yep.
So she made, I think on the tax return she revealed when she got to be first lady, was that the last 2 or 3 years with this firm she was with in Arkansas, I think she may have brought in about $200,000. So with that being said, her husband's long-term civil service, she becomes first lady. She gets a stipend, which is about $150,000 a year. Then what happens is she becomes a U.S. senator getting a civil service check. And then she becomes a civil servant who is Secretary of State. But with that background, she turns out to be worth $28 million, 14 months after leaving the Secretary of State.
I hope you folks are listening to what Judge Joe Brown is saying.
And then you want to get into the rest of it. Let's get Goldman Sachs. Cruz's wife worked for Goldman Sachs. Hillary's father was a low-level executive with Goldman Sachs. They got her the $26 million in speaking fees. You've got Barack Obama and Michelle worked for a law firm that represented Goldman Sachs. And
there it is.
Enough, they also represented his trust fund. Now, that trust fund makes him the richest person to ever have been U.S. president, Barack Obama.
And that's not bad. So Judge Brown, that's not bad for a black man and a black woman who didn't pay off their college student loan until they were 2 years into the White House.
That's a damn lie. They had no college student loan.
There it is.
So bottom line is that Barack Obama grew up in the household of one of the 10 or 15 richest men on the planet Earth. When he died, all of that went to an Indonesian trust fund that has 3 equal beneficiaries, Barack Obama and his 2 half siblings. He was not just rich, he was filthy rich. In other words, when his adoptive daddy walked in the room, there are only maybe 10 or 15 people in the whole world that controlled as much wealth as he did. The family background is that Lolo Soetoro was international executive vice president for Standard Oil.
That's correct.
Now, Indonesia sits on what may be the world's largest oil reserve.
That's correct.
For a number of reasons, Standard Oil couldn't really go after it, so they encouraged set up his own oil company. Soetoro did that. Now, the other interesting thing is on Soetoro's background that meshes with the Bush's other clandestine background. Soetoro was head of the death squads for the Indonesian army. He ran their Gestapo. So he's got muscle. He's got the connections and the financial backing of Standard Oil. He develops his own oil firm, becomes one of the world's richest oil tycoons. He does business with British Petroleum. Flash forward a long way to why doesn't Obama bring in other law firms to compel federal intervention? And why does Obama pardon all of those BP executives who were indicted by a federal grand jury?
For you folks who don't know, when Judge Joe Brown says BP, that's also including ARCO, that's BP.
Yeah, British Petroleum.
And before Judge Joe Brown goes on, I have to say this. For you folks who really don't have a clue, remember, I'm retired from LAPD. Back in the 60s, CIA came to LAPD because LAPD has the largest pornography collection in the world. They were trying to take down Sukarno because Sukarno wasn't going along with the U.S. government. And Sukarno, all he wanted was to sleep with Marilyn Monroe. But Marilyn Monroe refused to work for CIA and go over to Indonesia and sleep with Sukarno. So CIA came to LAPD, went to Parker Center, grabbed a videotape of a porn movie where there's a white woman who resembles Marilyn Monroe. They doctored the video, put Sukarno's image in it, but the people of Indonesia didn't fall for it. So when Judge Joe Brown talks to you now about Soetoro didn't get in office by accident. This has been a long, deliberate campaign to take out folks like Sukarno, who didn't go along with the U.S. policy, and that's where you got Soetoro today. But I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Okay, that one's daddy. By the way, do you know Cliff Stewart out there in Los Angeles?
Sir, we'll have to talk later.
Do you know him by any chance?
We'll have to talk later, sir.
Okay.
Judge Joe Brown, listen to me. Here's the funny thing, okay? The brothers back in Missouri, they thought I was mad at you. Now they're sitting back going, now I see what Mark was doing, and they're just shutting the fuck up because they know you and I are sharing information that nobody else is ever going to talk about, and I'm not going to talk about.
Okay. I've got a first cousin retired from the L.A. County Sheriff's Department.
I'll pray for you.
Were they? Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll throw the name that Cliff Stewart, Carl.
Brother, we'll have to talk about this later.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just...
No, listen to me, brother. what's going to happen, the guys on the show are going to send you my phone number, and we're going to talk about this off air. I ain't going to talk about Cliff on air.
Well, Cliff and I go back 50 years.
I'm sure you do. You related to him.
Well, no, Cliff Stewart. He used to talk about somebody else. My first cousin was on L.A. County Sheriff's Department. That's somebody else. But
yes, sir.
With Cliff, myself, and a guy named Ron Chappelle used to.
Come on. You know I know who Ron Chappelle is, but go ahead, brother.
Okay. He ran Trinity Avenue Elementary School playground back in the 60s and early 70s. Well, late 60s. And we had Tookie Williams, who was one of our students.
Dude, hey, brother, who do you think was in charge of the LAPD cops who had to protect everybody at the funeral when Tookie was buried?
Yeah, well, anyway, Tookie Williams was one of our students. He was a bright young brother, but we couldn't get him out of the swamp. So I guess
I know.
Baddest alligator.
And he was very intelligent.
Yeah,
and to this day, for you folks who don't know what Judge Joe Brown's talking about, Tookie Williams, they did not take away the death sentence. He was killed, and to this day, white children are buying children's books that are authored by Tookie Williams.
He was the last person executed on California's death row.
That's correct. And I'm the LAPD supervisor who had to guard that funeral to make sure we didn't have no drive-by shootings. Small world in it.
You know Teru also, I tell you.
Of course I do. Come on, brother.
Yes. No,
brother, listen to me. Let me tell you how serious this is.
Okay.
It was Crips and Bloods who watched my back in the hood when I had white LAPD cops trying to set me up to get killed.
Okay. Well, we aren't talking about it, remember, but I'm getting to this point. We also had a young brother who was skinny and 13 years old, but kind of tall for his age. That's the singer Barry White, the late singer Barry White. By the way, they put his age up by 9 or 10 years to match his voice. He wasn't as old as they said. It's tragic what happened to him. He was ill for a while. But we had an interesting playground over there, and all of this stuff came into play back late 60s, I'd say 68, 69, situation like that. It was very interesting what was going on. Tookie was the one that started the gang up. What was it, the Crips?
Yep, the Crips.
Yeah. So he started the Crips, but he was one of our kids on the playground. To show you what can happen when you've got a coherent program, the three of us, myself, Cliff Stewart, Ron Chappelle, ran that playground. And we got most of the brothers in the neighborhood to cooperate. So we had some real OGs that were helping out because we was doing stuff for their younger brothers and nephews and cousins and so forth. So we got a lot of community help. We set up a radio show. I was running as a DJ on that thing, and we sold hot dogs too. And this is the interesting thing. We'd take 1st through 7th graders to the movies in downtown LA when they still had them, because they had no more out in the hood. So the three of us men would supervise 150 to 200 kids every Wednesday night. We would get UCLA to provide the transportation. So it just took 3 men to supervise 200. And the patrons would say how quiet they were. Nobody knew they were in there until intermission when they bought up the concession stand. But the thing I'm saying about some of the other stuff, going back to give a clue to this, we had some UCLA ladies, some went to Cal State too, who were trying to do a thing, and they would bring along 9 or 10 other kids, and that'd be 9, 10, 12 of the women. But they couldn't control those 9 or 10 kids, and those 9 or 10 would start getting to 150 to 200 unruly, and it would be me, Cliff, or Ron would have to impose order. They would be upset about us being so strict about the behavior. But as we told them, these other kids really need the opportunity to get a little relief from the hell they're stuck in. So we don't want your little unruly brats jeopardizing them being able to go to the movies for free. So it's an interesting thing about the dynamic of men working with kids versus what happens when you get nothing but female influence. In one case, total disorder, chaos. And in the other, you have order, you have no chaos, and the kids are actually having fun and enjoying themselves.
Now, Judge Joe Brown, before you go on, listen to what Judge Joe Brown just said, how important it is to have male mentors. Because since I quit LAPD and all the other government agencies I work for, I returned to surfing because, you know, niggers can't swim much less surf. And I'm very successful coaching my female surfers from around the world. And most of my female surfers have no male role model in their lives. And because of me, they're successful. So for you folks listening, there's a meaning to my madness. When Judge Joe Brown comes on the show and says we have to find solutions, black males need to step up. You need to come back into the community. Be mentors for the girls. Be mentor for the boys. Be mentor for everybody. Because if you don't have a black male role model who's going to step up, but it's hard because as Joe Brown's already said, they've already punked out and pussified a lot of our black brothers.
Yeah, they have. There's another thing, too, that's going on that I don't like. Young man that I talked to, he's in his early 30s. He's a father. He's got 2 daughters. He's married. And he's a school teacher. He's also a coach. So they brought him over to put him in at this fairly new school, and they wanted him to be the coach of the swim team.
Oh, been there, done that.
Now, he said he flat refused when he showed up the first day and said, I've got all of these little white girls running around half naked.
There it is. Been there, done that.
To be getting in the water with them. Oh, hell no.
Oh, hell no. And, hey, brother, listen, you don't know this. Most of my female surfers from around the world are 12 to 17-year-old white girls. And when I went back on the radio with Carl Nelson in 2012, I had to cut most of them loose because I know what I'm sharing. There are a lot of people out there who hate my guts for sharing this, and I can't afford to have somebody making some allegation about me having an improper relationship with some little white girl 12 to 17 years old.
Well, let me tell you about my experience with Hollywood. 1998, November 14th. I had started this show, and it started airing in September.
Yes, sir.
I got this letter, which was one of the most insulting things I've ever received from Human Resources. And I'm reading it, and it says, we, the below signed 23 proud lesbians, object to having to work on the Joe Brown show.
Oh, my God.
My voice was grating, that I intimidated them being around them, that my wearing of suits and shirts and ties that were expensive were trying to rub in this gentility thing, that I opened doors for women. It was an insulting. I mean, that even though some of them had been in the Hollywood industry for 30, 35 years, they had never had to suffer.
And what year was this, brother?
This is 1998. They'd never had to suffer the ignominy of having to work for a straight black male. But, oh, by the way, there were so many nice homosexual black men, they said. Why did they have to work for me? And they wanted me banned from the lot. But anyway,
well, let me tell you. No, wait, brother, before you go on, let me tell you what happened to me a few years before that. I was one of the people selected to be a candidate on Hollywood Squares. Because the Hollywood Squares was doing a whole thing where they were like, you know, kissing ass and pretending like they loved the military and loved law enforcement. And since I'm both military and law enforcement, I was one of the people who's going to be selected to be on Hollywood Squares. They kicked me off the show. And you know why they kicked me off? Because Whoopi Goldberg got pissed off because I refused to call her by her first name. Because all these white lesbians and female genitalia, whatever they were, I was too militaristic because I called her Ms. Goldberg or yes, ma'am. So they figured that was too rigid and that couldn't be on the show.
It's proper
So
respect.
when you talk about what you just said, I can relate to that totally, brother.
Well, speaking of stuff like that, you know, you're a star if your studio says you're a star.
Right.
And for the last 3 years, I had this show before this artificial contract that's been developed. I was in the same unit run by a guy named Roger King, who ran King World. His daddy invented.
Oh yes, King World. Hell, King World went back to the days of the Little Rascals.
Yeah, that's his daddy brought that in for.
Hey, what do I know?
Well, anyway, he took a liking to me. So when they brought him in to deal with some of this nepotism that was in Paramount, who had the show, they assigned it to CBS, assigned him to be in charge of a special unit. He had discovered and groomed Oprah and discovered and groomed Phil.
Hell yeah.
He brought Phil and Oprah over, and they gave him Judy and me. So when he got in there, he said, I don't understand this. They don't even have you listed in TV Guide in Los Angeles. What is the problem? So he just said, we're going to change this around. So at first, the rankings and ratings were Oprah, Judy, Phil, and me. And then it quickly became Oprah, Judy, me, and then Phil. And then Judy started knocking boots with Oprah pretty hard. And they were bumping for first place. And then Oprah got knocked down under Judy in the ratings. And then I started beating Oprah almost every week in the ratings.
There it is.
And I started beating Judy in the ratings. But
there it is.
Nielsen changed the way that they did the ratings to boost her back up. Then I caught up with her again. Then they changed it again. But they wouldn't do it for me. Now,
yeah, but brother,
hold on. I'm making a point about
yes,
this.
sir. Go ahead.
You see, they never said I was a star, but if you looked at what they sent to the stockholders, they were bragging about I made them more money than any other show they had, and they were using the income to leverage out distribution and production on these Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movies, okay? Now, let's get back to another thing.
Yes, sir.
Ellen DeGeneres is supposed to be a superstar, right?
Yes, sir.
They let her run, MC the Oscars twice in a 10-year period, which were the lowest rated Oscars in that 10-year period. And I remember one year, KNBC4 in New York, which is the largest broadcast TV station in America at the time, asked me to do them a favor. They had bought into this Ellen DeGeneres superstar nonsense only to discover that every single show she had past that first sitcom had been canceled due to low ratings. So she came on after me on this station in New York. So I was running 5.4, 5.8, 6.2 in the ratings, and she was running 0.32, 0.27. So they asked me to do her a favor and appear on her show for 3 days because it came on after mine in New York. And I show up, and this woman's got the temperature at 80 degrees because she doesn't like air conditioning. She is trying to browbeat everybody on the thing. She walks up, says something to me. I didn't think it was funny, but I ignored it. And then she's telling me, yelling at me, put your robe on. I said, you asked, don't chill. I'm here to do you a favor.
Exactly.
Then she got nasty, so I said, I'm out of here, guys. Let's go. Let's call the limo. We're out of here. Judge, come back, come back. I said, I'm not working with this woman. She's insufferable. I said, who the hell do you think you are? You don't talk to anybody like that. She's talking to everybody in there. So I'm sitting there getting the high sign from all of these cameramen and other folks that worked on my show too to say, Judge, thank you. She's horrible to work with.
No shit. I'm sorry, no kidding.
She's actually had, in 1 year, she had 3 shows that got canceled, but they'd hire right back because she's the poster child.
Right.
You see, but that's because they want to control what you see.
Right.
And she sits there and she pushes that agenda, and they give her an American Express commercial. They have her emceeing the Oscars, which fall flat. And by the way, if you want to see who's going to win the Oscars, you go to the LGBTQ site, and they'll tell you a couple weeks beforehand who's going to win it. By the way, see, it's a fraud. There are 32,000 to 35,000 members of SAG now / after who can vote on who gets an Oscar. You know, you hear that stuff, 5 nominations, 8 nominations for Oscar. You know how many people that takes? 8 people out of the 32,000 to nominate somebody with 8 seconds. That's 16 out of 32,000 people who can nominate and make seconds. So
and 93% of them are white males.
Well, no, they're not white males. They're gay white males and lesbians.
Well, I can't. You can say that. I can't say that. So you brothers are laughing. There's always a meaning to my madness, and I already know this, but I had to have Judge Joe Brown say it.
Well, see, here's the deal. I mean, if you want to go that way, that's your business. But, you know, you shouldn't be allowed to use these propaganda
as your platform.
Propagandize certain behavioral styles.
That's right.
What happens is there have been Oscars won over the last 10 years where the person that got it only got 3 votes, literally.
Exactly. And by the way, for you folks that don't know this, there is a serious campaign before the Oscars to market you to they have lobbyists, just like the lobbyists in D.C. who buy off the congressmen. They have lobbyists in Hollywood to buy you off before the Oscars.
Well, I'm making a point here, which is this.
Yes.
You remember James Cameron? He did
Avatar.
Yes, sir.
He did Titanic. He did Avatar, and he did Abyss. Great movies.
Yes, sir.
Titanic and Avatar are 2 all-time highest-grossing movies ever. Well, they had him up nominated for Best Picture of the Year. Opposed to him was one of the worst war movies I've ever seen, Hurt Locker. Gave it to Hurt Locker. You know why?
It's true. It's true, but brother, I have to laugh, but it's true.
But you know why they gave it to Hurt Locker?
Hell yeah.
Because his ex-wife was the director and she had turned lesbian.
Oh.
So
There it is.
he read LGBTQ. Before they even had the Oscars, they were discussing how it was time to reward one of their own. So if you want to see who's going to Oscars, you go to the LGBTQ site, and the individuals that are perceived to have done the most by having a scene, having a line, having something in there, or another thing, or somebody is one of the good old members of LGBTQ, and it's time for him to get an award. They will tell you before the Oscars who's going to get it, and that'll be the person that gets the award.
Right, brother. So before you go on, I have to go back to something, because when I hung up the phone earlier, Judge Joe Brown talked about the movie Black Panthers, and let me quote directly, Black Panther has become a black pussy movie. You won't hear no argument from me, but what Judge Joe Brown failed to say to you was, that movie was stolen from Wesley Snipes.
I know.
And Judge Joe Brown, whose career I've been following for much longer than he would even remotely know, came close to being kicked off the judicial bench in New York because he tried to reopen the investigation of Martin Luther King's assassination involving James Earl Ray. And they actually accused him of being too sympathetic with James Earl Ray. Wesley Snipes,
Tennessee, by the way.
yes, sir. Wesley Snipes, I'm sorry, Tennessee, not New York. Wesley Snipes had agreed to make a movie called A Code Named Zorro.
Yes.
And when he decided to make that movie, all of a sudden he came under attack by the federal government and went to prison for 3 years for tax evasion, even though in Florida, they held a case in a county he never lived in, Ocala. All the blacks who were on jury duty were dismissed before they selected a jury.
Wait, let me tell you about it. I was there. I testified at the sentencing hearing.
Yes, sir.
I've known Wesley's family 35 years. His mother, Magic Johnson's mother, some coaches' mothers in the NBA and other actors, they put together a thing where they had NBA players give basketball camps to inner city kids. So I'd always be drafted into talking about character. But anyway, Wesley came up with the idea to do the Black Panther movie in 1992, and while he was actually in negotiations with them recently about doing it, they told him they weren't interested, but they were actually doing this Black Panther movie anyway.
Right.
In his edition, the good guy would have been more closely akin to Killmonger in the one that they had here, rather than the other way around. Now, when we went to that thing in Florida, the interesting thing about that county is, one, it is the only place in the United States where there is a freestanding Ku Klux Klan paraphernalia store.
There it is.
The judge now got angry as the devil when he found this out, because of some motions that needed to be argued. He instructed the jury to go home and advised them that they would be given notice when to come back. So he started jumping all of these jurors who did not show up on the date they were supposed to come back. Until he found out they were all black.
Exactly.
Every single black juror turned out to have been given the same wrong date as the others, which was not when they were supposed to come back. So he got on that. Now, about tax evasion, that's not what he got convicted of. He got convicted of 3 counts of failure to file a complete set of tax returns. And you want to know what is absolutely ridiculous? At the hearing, IRS was there, and guess what they were doing? They had a refund check for Wesley Snipes, $250,000 for overpayment of his taxes.
Now, before you go on, Judge Joe Brown, folks, there's a meaning to my madness, and I am like an attorney. I don't ask questions that I don't already know the answer to, but I can't say this because Judge Joe Brown has much more authority and legitimacy when it comes to this subject. See, I already know all this. And I already know that they dismissed all the black jurors who were called up for jury duty before they selected the all-white jury. I already know that 9 out of the 12 white jurors said that Wesley Snipes did nothing wrong. I already know that the 3 white jurors who found him guilty lied to get on that jury, but I have to have Judge Joe Brown tell you what he just said.
Well, okay. One of the white jurors called in to Larry King Live when I was on there in the studio with Larry King. Wesley Snipes was there with his lawyer, Meacham, by hookup, and a white juror called in. So the juror had not been prompted. He just got the number and said it was a travesty. We had no idea that was going to happen.
There it is.
Wesley's lawyer wanted to shut the guy up. And Larry King says, Judge, I said, there's no harm from him doing it. It's between him and the federal judge. The judge is pissed off. It was so bad. The government was jumping up and down demanding that Wesley's passport be permanently surrendered and then bond be revoked. And the judge said, now listen here, you sit down. Mr. Snipes running nowhere. Mr. Snipes, the court is ordering your passport being returned to you. You just make sure you are here for further proceedings. You may even leave the country, Mr. Snipes, to continue on your movie work. You know, see, there's a backstory on what was going on. On 911, see, Wesley Snipes has had a condominium at Ground Zero in New York. And what was going on, he was supposed to be back in the country, but he missed the flight. So he was late, told his wife and kids to stay at their home in New Jersey and not come to the condo. If they had come to the condo the night before like they were supposed to, they would have been there when the planes hit. In fact, So
oh my God!
Theory for what we were doing was he was definitely not trying to evade the payment of taxes. He was trying to make sure the government got what they got because they went after his family, at least indirectly. Now, the other thing is that they went after this tax firm. There were 11 people they wanted. They were all white. They had 4,200 plus clients, and only one of them was black. And the only client they indicted was Wesley Snipes. See, and the only thing they found him guilty of was this firm had acted for him. and he was only in town, in the country, like 3.5 weeks for over a 2.5, 3 year period, doing some movies, Blade 2 and some other
There
stuff.
it is. Oh no, wait, don't brother, don't dismiss that because he saved Marvel with those damn Blade movies.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying that's what he was doing while he wasn't in town. So
yes, sir.
They were acting for him, and one of the things the directors of the firm got indicted on was they gave false advisement to their clients that they were in that category.
There it is.
They could sign for the client rather than the other way around. Now, they didn't file a complete set of returns for Snipe, even though he had direct withdrawal on his account, so he overpaid IRS for $250,000. He walked into the courtroom with a certified check for $6.5 million to pay the feds. The judge directed the U.S. Attorney's Office to take the money to deliver to IRS. They refused. The judge went off on the U.S. Attorney's Office and wanted to know who they represented. And then it developed that IRS said they had a refund for $250,000. So, it also, the judge got put in a bad position by the way this stuff went down. I'd have to give him that. I testified as a character witness, and so did 3 other people, and it was kind of strange. The judge kept telling his lawyers, he said, look, Mr. Meacham, the court is very concerned about this. I've got outstanding letters of recommendation for your client. I have the court has read your brief thoroughly. The point you covered is on page 7. And the last point was on page 10, about at the top of the page. The court's trying to help you. Could you please put on your character witness? So this went on for several hours. The court just said, stop, Mr. Mason. The court's going to recess for lunch. 45 minutes, you come back and be prepared to put on some of these character witnesses. So we get back, and he's got on some young woman, 32 years old, who tells the judge she knows more about sentencing law than he does. He said, young lady, when the court swore you in, it learned that you was 32 years old. Was that correct? Well, yes, Your Honor. Well, this court been on this federal bench for 36 years, 4 more years, and you've been breathing air on this planet. You mean to tell the court that it don't know what it means about these federal guidelines? Well, watch your mouth, young lady. So the judge stopped this. He said, look, stop this. We'll take a 15-minute recess. You will put on 4 of your character witnesses, 15 minutes each. We're starting with Judge Joe Brown. Then we're coming in with Mr. So-and-so and Mr. Stewart and so on and so forth. So the judge made these fools put us on. That's how bad that was.
Yes, sir.
It was so bad that Snipes' wife had to get another crew of lawyers to try and intervene on the appeal and file as a habeas corpus rather than as a technical appeal.
Yes, sir.
So she put this together, but there was nothing that could be done. But it wasn't, bad situation about what went down. So afterwards, he didn't get a hard time where he was doing the time, but it's just the idea that somebody's restricting your freedom for 3 years. And see, the other thing that Wesley wanted to do is he's got a contract with the powers that be in the financing he's already arranged to do 7 movies. So he wanted the cooperation to do a Black Panther movie where he had put it on.
Right.
A lot of people don't know this, but those movies, The Expendable, he did those, and he's done some other stuff. So he knows what he's doing, but see, they blocked him. Now, maybe he can get a little play off of this movie the next go-around if they do one. But, Hollywood will go in and prop up some newbies and build them up and then cut them off at the knees if they are straight. If they're not, they love them because they're just one more somebody to do the casting couch routine with, which they do. It's just, it ain't heterosexual, is LGBT casting couch.
Right. So, brother, before you go on, so let me just stop and recap. There's always a meaning to my madness. I know the hosts already know this. They're figuring this out. I can't say this. I got to have Judge Joe Brown say this. Let me just recap for you. 1, Judge Joe Brown just verified what I said Wesley Snipes got screwed on a fraudulent tax evasion. And what pisses me off, if you go on the internet, many of the websites make him out like to be the poster child for tax fraud when we got people like Enron and those other crap. And even the white jurors even said he shouldn't have gone to jail, but there were 3 white jurors who lied to get on the jury. But my point to you is this. We get a
One
movie
of those,
that...
by the way, said he didn't intend for him to go to jail. Said, hell, he hadn't done anything.
Exactly. But my point is, earlier, Judge Joe Brown talked about how Anaheim and... See, I'm Mark from Anaheim. So I live 5 minutes from Disneyland. I never go there. I hate the Nazis over there. And Anaheim is a German town. But my point is, when you have folks now making this movie that everybody thinks is so down with the brothers, and as I could not more eloquently say, Black Panthers is a black pussy movie. Most folks don't even know that was Wesley Snipes' concept. It was stolen from him. It was totally changed because he was told that white America would never go see a black Hollywood movie star who's a superhero. But more importantly, let's move back up to Judge Joe Brown and James Earl Ray. When Wesley announced that he was going to make a movie called Codename Zorro, which was the nickname that the FBI used for Martin Luther King Jr., that's when they took Wesley Snipes down for tax evasion.
Yep.
And I only wish that I was making all this up. So what I would just say to you is this.
Let me say something since we get to James Earl Ray and Martin Luther King.
Yes, sir.
They assumed that since I was black, I would be all, let's just get this over with, easily out of the way. I don't play things that way. I always
exactly. Why do you think I'm doing this show with you, man? I love you. I respect you, man.
Now, here's the thing that's interesting. In the Civil Rights Museum, they got a 760 Remington Game Master pump, 30-06.
There it is.
The rifle that killed that killed Martin Luther King.
Used that rifle many times, but go ahead.
Well, what's interesting is the FBI claimed the bullet they pulled out of King's body was too distorted to test. So they never, in the entire record, said the rifle is the one that killed King because they said we couldn't test it.
Right.
They also took the bullets that they used for test bullets and they fired them into a medium of cut-up yellow pads with the staple still in there, which is guaranteed to remove the striations. There is a thing among some police departments and prosecutorial agencies where they don't want an absolute identification, ballistic identity established. What they want is to show that this weapon is consistent with the type. In other words, it's not the Smith & Wesson Model 1038 Special that shot this guy, but it looks like it was a Smith & Wesson 38, so it can be any number of these revolvers that we have floating around this city by the thousands. So we don't want to exclude anybody. We just want to include. Now, here's what was the key. I did a lot of defense work. I think as a lawyer, I tried 42 first-degree murder cases, death penalty demanded. And I got into ballistics. So I'm looking at this stuff and evidence, the picture. And I said,
here we go, folks.
I said, that bullet's not too distorted to test. So when I got the rifle retested after they had removed me from the case twice and put me back on twice.
Yes, sir.
On the Supreme Court, I had them do a scanning electron microscopy on the 3 jacket fragments they had and blew them up about the size of a house. And it was very interesting. Ray's rifle has a rate of rifling twist of 1 turn in every 10 inches.
That's
and
correct.
when I did the trigonometry on what they pulled out of King, it had a rate of rifling twist of 1 turn in every 11¼ inches. I said, did Ray have access to a custom barrel maker? No, he did not. That Remington Game Master with the 1 and 10 inch rate of rifling twist not only has an inconsistent rate of rifling twist, there is a manufacturing defect in the rifling that shows up that ain't showing up anywhere, no how, no way. So I said, what is going on here? I said, this is 1968. I said, oh, hell, I remember reading this years ago.
So I pulled out my reference material, and there we find that a company called Psionics, which at that time made the Ingram Mac 10 that's used to see in all of the 70s adventure series.
No
that
comment.
Small submachine gun, and also the Psionic suppressor. They had a contract with the U.S. government to make up 62 XM21s that used a stainless steel barrel made up by the Army Marksmanship Unit of one turn in every 11¼ inches. I said, aha, it matches the bullet. Next thing I discovered, there's an actual invoice. The FBI took delivery of 5 of these rifles in late December 1967. The Defense Department raised all kinds of hell about getting them back. And what they wound up with late April was an inventory by the FBI where they claimed they could only find 4, and a 5th one was lost somewhere in the system. That's the murder weapon. The shot, by the way, did not come from the flop house. It didn't come from the bushes. If anybody was with a rifle in the bushes, they would have had to stay there about 4.5 hours out in the open.
There it is.
Could have been clearly viewed from behind the bushes up the hill.
Now, brother, before you go on, just to enlighten the listeners, because I don't assume they know, what happened to all the black firefighters and
okay,
cops?
I'll get into that. We got an affidavit from the black firefighter up there, and he said that he was told that his son had been badly hurt, and he took off to go see about
You got to go home. Your son's hurt.
Yeah, but the son was not hurt. He was
Exactly.
safe. No problems. Now, there was also something else going on. There was one black cop up there.
Yes, sir.
Who was on overwatch.
That's correct.
The fire station.
Yes, sir.
And that cop's name was Ed Reddick.
That's correct.
He wound up running for sheriff up here in Haywood County with Buford Pusser of Walking Tall fame.
I know all about Buford Pusser because he tried to go up against the drug cartels. But
well,
yeah, Ed Reddick was threatened that he had to come home, and they wanted to protect him, and he couldn't work that day.
Yeah, well, here's what he said happened to him. The 10 white cops took up in 2 squad cars. They double handcuffed him and took a rope and hog-tied his legs.
There it is.
Him struggling, threw him in the back of a car and removed him.
That's how they're protecting him.
That 6 other black officers, sergeants and detectives were forming a security squad for King, and they ordered them to leave. Now, the shot was fired from the fire station.
Hold on, brother, before you go on about the shots. Who was in charge of both the fire department and the police department that day?
Okay, I know his name. Give me a second to come up with it because he had been both fire and police commissioner, and
before that, what was he?
He had worked under J. Edgar as one of his
J. Edgar Hoover in the FBI.
Right. So anyway, see, you have to understand about Memphis. Memphis is the first-degree murder capital of America, and I'm not talking about street murder. There was a prominent barbecue place here in Memphis that was great barbecue.
Oh, hell yeah.
Interestingly, they stayed open till 2 o'clock every night, but they seemed to have shut the cash register off at 7:30 every day.
Well, the Klan rally has to come afterwards, but
no, that's not what happened. They took cash and credit card and checks, out of town checks with no ID but no credit cards. So there was a little problem with the money. So the owner dies in a supposed 1-car wreck on I-55, just leaving Memphis going into Mississippi at about 3:30 a.m. Wednesday morning. His general manager dies within a half mile of the same location in a 1-car wreck Thursday morning at the same location, essentially. And on Friday, his chief accountant dies at the same location, 1-car wreck, no witnesses, And that's been 35 years ago. No suspects ever taken into custody, and nobody looked into it.
That's a coincidence.
Yeah, well, yeah, a great coincidence. But that's what happens around here. Emmett Till was killed within 70 miles, 50 miles a year. You've got those 4 civil rights workers that got buried in the levee within 50 miles a year.
Yes,
you got Medgar Evers killed within 50 miles a year.
Yes, sir.
And you've got all kinds of white-collar murders that go on here that are listed as accidents. I even had a room that I admit when it became obvious that something was going wrong.
And before you go on, let me just make this clear to you folks. I will never share with you what I don't already know. Everything the brothers are sharing with you, guess what organization is in common with all that? John Birch Society.
Oh, JBS.
Well, that's Walt Disney, by the way. So
exactly. I know, dude. I know. I'm like 5 minutes. I'm from 5 minutes from Disneyland. I know.
Yeah, well, Walt Disney paid for all of that. That was part of his estate, was to finance the John Birches. So we get that whole thing with the mouse. But wait, brother, before you go on. So let me just explain this to the listeners. I live in Orange County, California. Now, out here, because they have money, they don't call themselves the John Birch Society. They call themselves the Welch Foundation. But I'm sorry, brother, go ahead. Well, yeah, but I'm not trying to get into the details. But that's part of the side story. The thing about it is this is an easy place to kill somebody and get away with it.
Hell yeah.
The DA's office has long been implicit in covering up that kind of thing. And it's interesting, some of the murders that now are coming to light where the DA's office was, and also that's a long story. But what we got here is a situation where Dr. King was killed by a weapon that was supplied by the FBI. It came from not the flop house, and there's an interesting story about that. We got an affidavit, a video affidavit from the first detective to arrive on the scene. His name was Tommy Smith. He retired as captain, chief of homicide for Memphis Police Department. When he says he arrived at the scene, he was directed by dispatch to go to the flop house. He says in all of his years since that point, he had never been able to find out who gave that instruction to dispatch, but he went. He said he quickly determined that it could not be a shot from the flop house bathroom. Why? Because there was a very thick tree growing between the bathroom window and the Lorraine Motel. You couldn't see it. There it is. Within an hour after the killing, and they found that the tree had been cut down.
Oh, by the way, brother, before you go on, and for you folks out there who don't know, they did the same thing in Daley Plaza. When folks went back to do the investigation, the trees that would block the view had been cut down in Daley Plaza in Dallas. But I'm sorry, go ahead, brother.
Okay, so anyway, what happens is that the cut down order was given to the sanitation department, but guess what? They're on strike, so they didn't do it. So it wasn't the flop house. They had 2 witnesses who, in the record, I reviewed the record, the affidavits thoroughly, who say that they saw James Earl Ray within 3 minutes of the killing, and then 10 minutes before that in the flop house bathroom with a rifle. Now, those same 2, interestingly enough, were found unconscious by the detective. He couldn't revive them.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing, but
they stayed in intensive care for almost a week because had they not been alcoholics, they would have been dead because they had twice the fatal limit of alcohol in their systems.
There it is. But brother, before you go on, so let me just clear this up for the listeners. I wouldn't be doing this show today if I wasn't getting drunk. So shut up, guys, because you already know. Anyway, shut up. But wait. So before Judge Joe Brown goes on, please enlighten the listeners to the witness who ended up in a psychiatric ward, so that she would not be allowed to talk.
Well, there were several people that had some 603 problems, they call them in Tennessee. But back to this thing here. These witnesses had, one of them, the woman, was passed out with her dress hiked up over her naked hips in a pool of urine, and the guy was on the bed passed out in a pool of urine. He had 0.76 and she had 0.72 BAC. That's over twice the 0.38 to 4.42 that served as a fatal dose for most people.
Hang on, brother. So for the listeners out there listening to Judge Joe Brown, he just said BAC. That's blood alcohol content. But go ahead, brother.
Yeah, in other words, you killed. Ordinarily, you drank so much you just killed yourself. But
you guys have no idea what we're sharing with you right now.
So he also came up with the cab company that had arrived approximately 15 minutes before the killing to pick these two up, and interviewed the cab driver, who advised that they were too intoxicated to revive.
Yes, sir.
So that whole thing goes by the window. This thing with the shot from the bushes goes by the window. But when we get this whole thing where everybody's pointing in a certain direction, I went by and conducted some sound experiments. Here's what goes on. You have the Lorraine Motel, which is a flat surface tow house. It was a motel.
Which King was never intended to be there in the first place until he got outed.
He wasn't supposed to be there. Across the street, about 45 yards away, you have the fire station.
Yes, sir.
On the second floor, you have some thin sliding windows that are positioned in front of the firehouse dormitory.
Yes, sir.
Now, there are some tables that were bolted down inside there, which were used as the rest for the rifle. The rifle was fired from the fire station. Now, why people think they hear it is because when you put this psionic suppressor on this weapon, along with the special ammunition that, by the way, precisely matched the characteristics of the bullet they pull out of King, the FBI got a huge stock of this that was specially hand-loaded. And it's designed to be subsonic, 1,100 some feet per second. Standard 308-762 30-06, somewhere around 2,500.
That's correct. And I'm a rifle expert, so I know what he's saying, but go ahead, brother.
Now, what happens is if you shoot somebody in the torso and you get a solid torso hit from 45 to 50 yards, and the person is standing next to an emergency room at the time he's shot, it's still non-survivable. He's dead. But they decided to take a headshot. So that's because the bullet being reduced down to about 1,100 feet per second is basically a 30 caliber pistol with about 350 or 60 foot-pounds of energy. The bullet hits him in his right cheek. It goes through his molars, wrecks his tongue, leaves the body between the lower jaws, exits. It hits right above the clavicle. Deflects along the clavicle under the neck skin, clips a carotid artery, travels over the right shoulder from high right going down to lower left, passes the right scapula over the backbone or spine, and then lodges between the left scapula and the skin. It never penetrated the thorax. What you found was that there was very little blood out there because the entry wound and the exit wound were not associated with the damaged carotid artery. So he might have survived if the bullet had not clipped the artery, but he probably couldn't have talked very well. So that being the case, that's what caused me to be very curious about what went on here. And I said, you know what? Something is wrong with this picture. But anyway, you've got this subsonic bullet, so that means that the sound of the shot is going to arrive at the target at the same time as the bullet rather than afterwards. It also meant the peculiarities of the attenuated sound were going to echo off of the Lorraine Motel. And when we conducted an experiment out there, what happens is where it sounds like that shot winds up is back across the street. It travels from the fire station to the Lorraine Motel, deflects off of the Lorraine Motel, bounces back to where the bushes are, and behind the bushes at that point there was a bank at one time. So that would have confused people into assuming that the sound of the shot came from that location rather than where it actually came from. Now, it seems that that rifle was left in the fire station dormitory and picked up several hours later. Captain Tommy Smith says that he entered the flop house from the street entrance. He came in looking around to try and find these witnesses he was directed to seek. He left, and when he comes back, he says there, laying right there at the exit of the flop house to the street on the sidewalk, is Ray's rifle and his radio with a brass plaque on it, identifying it as belonging to inmate so-and-so and so-and-so, state penitentiary, such and such. And he said it wasn't there when they arrived, but it was there when they came. So they also, by the way, the Memphis Police Department determined that Ray was not the shooter. But the DA's office here, with its connections to the Hoover administration, insisted on going after James Earl Ray, who, by the way, never confessed. And here's something you may not know. I'll give you this. There is an algorithm that the State Department and the Defense Department use. It's not a polygraph test. It requires a clear recorded video of somebody talking. And they analyze voice tones and body movement. And based on the theory that only 15% of what humans say is based on the words, the other 35% is based on tone and 50% on body language. They analyze the tone, and they have a 1 through 34 scale on whether somebody's lying or telling the truth. Now, they rented 5 hours of tape reflecting the last known interview of James Earl Ray. Their purpose was to get a bottom line on a known liar. They say they were astonished when Ray seemed to be telling the absolute truth and equivocated on just 2 subjects. If you didn't do it, do you know who did? And he says, I'm not sure. And that's the type of equivocation of being truthful. So what went on is some officers in the U.S. military were concerned about their oaths and what was going on down in Guantanamo at the time, which is why they contacted me. Said, this is an example of when it was against the law to do what was done, and J. Edgar just violated it with impunity. But now it's not against the law to do what was done here, and we are very nervous about the abuse. So we brought this to your attention. We'd like to hear what you know about this. So that got very interesting from that context.
So before the Honorable Judge O'Brien goes on, I can't get into specifics here. This is where I have to be careful how I talk about this. I'll just say this. The reason Weinstein went down is because of the movie American Made. Weinstein features in American Made a treetop flyer who was a drug smuggler for CIA. And he was connected with that whole milieu back in New Orleans and Memphis, Tennessee. If you folks really do some research, you'll find out the same players involved in 22 November 1963 were involved with MLK and were involved here in L.A. at the Ambassador Hotel. That's as much as I can say about this, but what I will say is Barry Seal, even though that movie I highly recommend that movie. The movie lies to you because it suggests that Barry Seal was recruited by CIA in the 70s for TWA. That's BS. He was running guns in Cuba when we were supporting Batista. But he was running guns in Cuba before Batista when we were supporting Castro. You folks don't know this, but we were supporting Castro before Batista. He was in the same era with guys like Lee Harvey Oswald and, a certain guy who was training folks at the Civil Air Patrol out of New Orleans. And they show him in the movie JFK. and Joe Pesci plays his character in the movie. I'll just say there's a lot of players that were involved with JFK, MLK, and RFK who are all the same players. And what Judge Joe Brown is alluding to, without being specific, many of these players were involved with the milieu of the anti-Castro, the so-called National Guard and Army Reserve militia folks out of the military intelligence, folks that I was connected to much later on in my life after this all happened. But I would just say this. I began taking photographs in 1969. Now, I have more photographs than anybody else on Facebook. In 1969, some of the first photographs I ever took were of Coretta Scott King, Ralph Abernathy, and others, because Martin Luther King had already been killed, and they all came to Charleston, South Carolina, which is my home, to do the protest against the hospital strike for the black hospital workers. All my photographs were stolen because back in those days you had to go to Rexall drugstore to process your film. And I'm sure somebody's probably using my photographs making millions of dollars. So who knows? My point to you is this. I didn't even know what I was being involved with when I was only 12 years old. Well, actually 11 and a half years old. When Coretta Scott King, Ralph Abernathy, and others came to Charleston after Martin Luther King Jr. had been killed. Fast forward to 1981, I go to a black church in Charleston, South Carolina, and Dick Gregory and I meet for the first time. And Dick Gregory tells me, Ronald Reagan's going to be shot, but he won't die, and you'll see the folks behind the scenes who's really involved. And sure enough, Reagan was shot. So I become a Marine Corps officer candidate. I'm in Quantico, Virginia. The guy who they allege shot Ronald Reagan, John Hinckley, is the son of John Hinckley Sr., and John Hinckley Sr. was next door neighbors with George Herbert Walker Bush. And I almost got in trouble in Quantico because he was at the break in Quantico, and when John Hinckley Jr. would be running and I was in OCS, I would go out and give him a hard time. So what I'm just saying to you folks is, listen carefully to what Judge Joe Brown is saying, because he does not have my background, but he has knowledge and information from his background that I can tell you what I know since those assassinations, and you folks have no idea. But this show today, I'm going to get in trouble for this show. This show will probably take it off of YouTube. But the information, you know, you laughing because you know what I'm telling you. What Judge Joe Brown has already shared today, and what I have shared today is information you're not going to get anywhere else. And that's why I did not go to this Costa Mesa premiere of a movie for African surfers, because it's hard for me in the surfing community, but I already knew what was going to go on. I purposely hanged up on purpose so that you guys can call me back. I can piss off Judge Joe Brown and make him say the things I would never have been able to make him say if he didn't think I was already an antagonist. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm just having fun with it.
I know you are, brother, and I also know you already know who I am.
I'm so thankful for both of you guys being on.
Okay.
For real.
You know, but serious business. One of the things that we have to watch out for is the periodic effort that goes back through American history to lynch the black man.
Yeah. There it is.
And this hashtag #MeToo is to a great extent driven by that engine. A lot of what's going on out there is not good. You've got some old white folks, young ones, old ones, they are confused because the world's not going the way they've been taught that it should go.
So I have a question for you, Judge.
Yeah.
Why would somebody name an organization Black Lives Matter instead of Black Lives Matter also?
Well, because 3 lesbians founded it.
There it is.
That was to push the LGBTQ movement. If you go now, you don't see black men, you see a lot of black women.
There it is.
On the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March, you saw very few men. You saw a lot of women who were trying to do their thing and co-opt it. It's with due respect to the sisters. I respect what they do. However, sometimes there are things that men have to do. And right now, our society has been pushing for 50 years an agenda that is calculated to have the general public forget what men are supposed to be about. And my little saying on that for the women who need a reminder, let me put it this way. You are in your early, mid-30s. You've been successful in the business world. You're making some money. You're moving up in the corporate structure. You have a nice 2-bedroom condo in a good neighborhood. You're upstairs. You're drinking white wine, reading the novel, and you turn the light out, go to sleep. You're not quite asleep when you hear some broken glass down on the first floor.
Yeah, it is.
At that point, would you like to have a man who's competent in the bed with you to go see about it?
No, I want my girlfriend. I want my white feminist girlfriend to go, please don't do that.
Yeah. See, that's what the real deal is about. And somebody that had their ass kicked. And then the thing I don't think is good, because I saw a pragmatic fallout from it when I had my domestic violence days in court. And you get this thing where, and then the hot stuff was like Mortal Kombat, but they had these female avatars that the boys would use to play. And you had stuff going on. I remember when I was on an advisory board for this local school system around here. And they wanted me to come in because they were going to discipline these 5 or 6 male homeroom teachers who had told the boys they were stronger than girls, so they should never hit them. And the parents of some girls objected to that because it was demeaning and destroyed their daughter's self-esteem. It was silly as hell, but I mean, that was the perspective. So you keep teaching these boys that girls are the same in all ways, and they don't get the difference. And they'll punch them in the mouth. And now you have, you know, you've got Batman, Superman, Android. You've got, what's his name, Aquaman. And you've got...
Oh, my God. Sorry.
You know, so you've got Thor in Ragnarok, and the badass is his unpure, unknown sister. And a Valkyrie puts him in check and keeps him captive. You know, you got all this stuff going on. So you have this little thing where they have been subtly insinuating the girls in playing the boys' roles as the action hero and the badass. That's going to get some woman's ass kicked. Now, you've been in the military, and I don't want to speak for them, but I think it's an abomination to put women in combat.
It is.
All right, brother. Right, brother. Before you go on, let me just explain this because I know the hosts are laughing because some of the hosts I've had conversation with them off there. So let me just go back to what Judge Joe Brown just said. When I was a captain in the Marine Corps, and dude, trust me, I was trained by Nazis. My mentors were World War II Nazis, World War II OSS members, and World War II Office of Naval Intelligence members. So I was programmed not to show weakness or emotions. I was at a church in Yorba Linda, California in 1993, and a black man came up to me, and I started crying. And the reason this black man came up to me and caused me to start crying was this black man says, oh, my God, I have never seen a black Marine Corps officer in my life. I was in uniform. Will you please, sir, allow me just to touch your bars? And I'm like, what the hell? So this guy touched my bars. And when he touched my bars, he says, I'm a Montford Point Marine. And I'm like, okay. I had no idea what a Montford Point Marine was. So I do some homework, and I find out the Montford Point Marines were the first blacks allowed to be in the Marine Corps, but that's not true either. I got
an autograph from one, by the way. The only person I've ever asked for an autograph was one.
Well, check this out, brother. You don't know this, but I'm the one who was responsible for Congress giving them medals. But anyway, so, and unlike what you may have been told, the first black Marine was back in the 1700s. His name was Cato, Keto. And because I do write-ups on it, you can go on the internet now and find it. But my whole point is this. I started crying because this black Marine, he showed me his ID card from World War II, and I felt like a total imbecile because I had no idea. By the way, the same day I met Rosa Parks for the first time, because Rosa Parks is not the godmother of the civil rights movement.
September
One of
Clark.
my babysitters, September Clark, is the godmother of the civil rights movement. But my point is this. I was at this church in Yorba Linda, it's Basson Cherry, and what happened was this brother started crying just touching my bars because he'd never seen a black man in a Marine Corps officer's uniform. So I did a lot of research, and I'm not going to take credit for it, but I will say I hope that I was instrumental in stopping Clint Eastwood for even being nominated for an Academy Award, because he made a movie about World War II, and he refused to include the black Mafia Point Marines in his movie.
Yeah,
Even when there it is. So when Judge Joe Brown is telling you what he's saying, what I'm telling you is this, okay? A lot of folks in the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps hate me because I share information that's history, not his story.
Right.
And I share information based on folks who are mentors who prevented me from being killed by Navy SEALs and Marine Corps recon. And I've trained most of those guys. And when the judge comes on the show and starts talking about what he's saying, he doesn't know what I know. And what I would just tell you about down in Louisiana and down in Memphis, Tennessee, Lee Harvey Oswald was naval intelligence. I know. I was naval intelligence. I can't say everything I want to say, but I'll just say this. I was involved in a program where I was going to take somebody out, but thank God I didn't fall for the brainwashing and the technology, and I didn't. And I still won't talk about it for a long time, but just like Lee Harvey Oswald, he was involved with, these guys like David Ferry. Well, if you look at the movie American Made with Barry Seal grew up with Lee Harvey Oswald. Barry Seal grew up with David Ferry. So unlike American Made, that I highly recommend, and both the Trump administration and Hillary Clinton did not want you to see that movie. That's why Harvey Weinstein went down. Everybody known he was a pervert, but he went down because he came out with a movie showing you what was really going on during Iran-Contra. And I hate Ollie North, but I'm one of the guys who helped pay for his legal defense. Trust me, you folks have no idea. So anyway, I'm just saying, when you see the movie like American Made, where people were killed during the filming of that movie, and that's why Tom Cruise did all his own flying, because he knew he would be killed if he didn't go along. Harvey Weinstein didn't go down for being a pervert. Harvey Weinstein went down because of the movie American Made. You look at the guys like this guy who does the movie, the TV show House of Cards, okay? Kevin Spacey did not go down for being a pervert. Kevin Spacey went down because in House of Cards, seasons 5 and 6 tells you what's really going on in this country. And I know Judge Joe Brown is like, what the hell is he talking about? Trust me, this is what I do. Dick Gregory told folks a long time ago, I'm the human early warning system.
Yes, sir.
I didn't want to accept that. I didn't even know what Dick Gregory was telling me until my mother told me right before she died, when I was only 2 years old. Nazis in this country were using me for psychic experiments in New York City. So I'm just listen to what I'm telling you, please, because I know I'm going to let Judge Joe Brown continue. If you look at 22 November, when Kennedy was taken down, if you look at Martin Luther King assassinated, if you look out here in L.A. with Robert F. Kennedy assassinated, please, folks, go back and do some research on one name, a guy named Milter. And I know Judge Joe Brown knows who that is, so I'm going to shut up now and ask you, Judge Joe Brown, what do you know about Joseph Milter?
I don't know that much about it.
Oh, my God!
Listen.
John Birch Society, who told you they were going to kill King.
Listen. The way I approach history is not to know the names. It's the significance of the acts. So I have a lot of stuff cluttering my head up over the years, so I may not remember a name, but I remember the significance of what somebody did, all right?
Yes, sir.
So that's the way I approach it. But not the bottom, I hate that term. Well, I don't know where I got that from.
White folks.
Yeah. This thing is dangerous. Something needs to be done about it. And to a great extent, even if nobody were carefully and calculatedly plotting and planning to do something, when you get a governmental entity dealing with what is called a body politic, the whole thing starts acting like an organic entity, and it starts behaving as though it has its own motives and purposes. So things that can look like conspiracies can just evolve matter of fact.
Strictly business. Strictly business.
Yeah, sometimes things that don't look like much are actual conspiracies, but the whole thing functions in a certain way. And after something has been doing the same thing for a while, when it is just body politic, there's usually an organic reason for it doing that. So I try to seek out the reasons and how it got or evolved to where it was. Now, one of the things that is very bad right now is we've got this Homeland Security / Patriot Act thing.
No shit.
It made what J. Edgar Hoover did that was illegal. It now makes it legal.
Now, but wait, brother, before you go on, so for you listeners out there who don't know, what Judge Joe Brown is alluding to, when Nixon became president, he put a guy on the Supreme Court that he hoped would support him. There was a program called the Houston Plan, Huston Plan. This plan was so nefarious that even his own Supreme Court appointee said, hell no. Now you fast forward to 1994, you got William Jefferson Clinton in the White House. You got Hillary talking about black folks being super predators.
Yes.
And Bill Clinton endorsed the Congress. Trust me, I know this because I was there. And they passed a bill called the 1994 Omnibus Crime Bill. If you look at the Omnibus Crime Bill of 1994, it says to you, based on the Safe Street Crime Act during the Nixon administration. So what I'm telling you, folks, because a lot of folks worship the damn Democratic Party.
Yes.
What the Republican Nixon administration could not get passed in 1994, and I came on radio shows telling people, please don't let this happen. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, folks like Malvo, the black feminists, all these new age folks like Oprah Winfrey and others who support the Hillary Clinton campaign. And remember, I told you, I turned down a White House fellowship and a Fulbright scholarship. I didn't go along with the program. I won't sell my soul. I'm letting you know, trust me when I tell you this. These folks that came in the early 1990s under Bill and Hillary Clinton, and if you look at Savoy magazine, spring 2018, you see all the House Negroes in there. I didn't go along with the program, but a lot of these folks who were going along with that program, what the Republican Party, and by the way, my children grew up playing at the Nixon Library. I'm not making this up. And Nixon Library, they invite me to everything. So what I'm saying, what Nixon couldn't pass during his term in office, Barack Hussein Obama got later, but Bill Clinton, as a Democrat, got passed. And if you folks want to know what I'm talking about, go back to what Judge Joe Brown just stated. Go back and look at the Houston Plan, Huston Plan. Now, I retired from LAPD. On LAPD, the biggest domestic spy scandal was the LAPD PDID, Police Disorder Intelligence Division. That was run by Western Goals Foundation. Western Goals Foundation is a John Birch Society organization. Now they're in England, and they're doing in England what they used to do here, but they're also doing it here, and the money comes from the Mercer family, the Koch brothers, and the people who put Donald Trump and Mike Pence in the White House. And if you look back at who killed Robert F. Kennedy, I'm from L.A. When Robert F. Kennedy was killed, the number one coroner in this country was Noguchi. Noguchi was not allowed to testify in that trial because he said Robert F. Kennedy was killed 3 inches or less behind his head. And as you know, luminary black NFL player Rosie Greer took it to round down. Same thing happened in the O.J. Simpson trial. The L.A. coroner said that the blood found with O.J.'s blood in it had preservatives in it. So just like during the Robert F. Kennedy assassination, they brought in a coroner from the Bay Area. Just like during the O.J. Simpson trial, they brought in a coroner from the Bay Area. How do I know? I refuse to testify in the O.J. Simpson trial. Brother, please continue.
Oh, I was just going to say, it might be helpful to your research. There is a Center for Records and Review of Assassinations Records and Review Bureau. They had it down on 14th Street in downtown D.C. up until a few years ago when I think they moved it out to Bethesda. But if you go in there, you can make a request and they will give you certified copies of documents that you can request, or they can do research for you for a fee. It was enabled by Congressional Act and 2 executive orders by George Herbert Walker Bush and Bill Clinton. And all of the agencies involved in the assassination attempts that were involving national figures, King, Wallace, the Kennedys.
Oh, my God. I'm sorry, brother. Stop before you go on. You mentioned George Wallace.
Hold on a second.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, brother.
Hold on. The point is it even includes memoranda, internal memoranda. And in the record that they have here in that Ray file in Memphis, they wound up putting stuff in there that may or may not still be there. But they were internal memoranda by the FBI discussing whether King would be more dangerous as a dead martyr or as alive.
Oh, my God.
They weren't concerned about civil rights. They thought that was dead because of the new militancy. They were concerned about 2 things. A, King revitalizing the labor movement and galvanized the anti-war movement. That's
true.
So that's what they were discussing about whether he'd be more dangerous dead or alive.
That's true.
Now,
Mr. Zorro. They call him Zorro.
Yes, but mostly the memos are primitive inner office memos. They didn't even go Zorro. They just said discussion on the issue at hand as per the director's wishes. Check with agent so-and-so. Point more dangerous dead or alive? Question mark. And then this points raised down in handwritten memos so you can identify who wrote them.
So what I want to tell you folks, I don't give a damn. I'm drunk now.
Me too.
Stop laughing. Stop laughing, Patrick. So anyway, my point is this, okay? What the brother just said was this, okay? They didn't know what was really going on. So let me just tell you folks, I call him Gay Edgar Hoover, and there's a meaning to my madness.
John Colson.
Gay Edgar Hoover got popped in a bathroom at the Delray racetrack. Now, I'm from Southern California, and I mean, Mitt Romney has a house down here in La Jolla, which is close to Delray racetrack. This news reporter, he was just walking out the bathroom, and he saw Gay Edgar Hoover walking out the stall with a little boy, and his career was over. Trust me, I just tell you. I don't give a damn about heterosexuals or homosexuals, but the point is, Gay Edgar Hoover destroyed the careers of many people because of their homosexuality, including that news reporter who saw him coming out the bathroom with this little boy. Now, why am I saying this to you? Because while Judge Joe Brown was talking this, he doesn't have my background, okay? And I'll just say there's a lot of stuff that came out under the COINTELPRO, the Houston Act, and the whole thing going after the Black Panthers, because earlier we talked about Ron Karenga, and he talked about Kwanzaa, okay? LAPD SWAT, I trained a lot of them. In fact, probably most guys in LAPD SWAT, I trained them. Anyway, LAPD SWAT has 4154 in their cars. 41 symbolized 41st Street Central. Geronimo Pratt. Geronimo Pratt was a Silver Star recipient. He knew how to fortify a compound. LAPD came after him, and he told all the guys, take your clothes off, walk outside in your chonies. LAPD can't kill you. And 54 for LAPD SWAT is the Symbionese Liberation Army. So when Judge Joe Brown was talking earlier, he doesn't know what I know. I'll just tell you this.
Symbionese Liberation Army. I recruited Geronimo Pratt to UCLA.
Hey, okay, and we get deeper than this, because when you go back to Ron Karenga, and he talks about Kwanzaa, that was used as a 7-headed cobra symbol for the Symbionese Liberation Army.
Damn.
Yeah, the Symbionese Liberation Army is interesting. There was a guy named Ronald DeFreeze, known as...
Hell yeah, Donald DeFreeze, not Ronald DeFreeze,
Yeah.
Donald DeFreeze.
Well, Donald DeFreeze. I went to junior high.
Oh my God, dude, we're gonna get in trouble today.
I went to junior high school with him at John Muir Junior High School.
That's absolutely correct. You know, I already know this, right?
Interesting thing here.
So, have you ever heard of the book called The Glass House Tapes?
Yeah, that's that. I know the brother that did that. It's called The Glass House, and there's a second one called Glass House 2. And that is, I saw him identified at a trial, a murder trial, one time as the #1 undercover agent for LAPD.
There it is.
Unit, not as an informant. That is, what is his name? It'll come to me in a bit.
Well, before you go on, brother, let me just tell you folks who you don't know. The Glass House refers to Parker Center. That's the Glass House.
I know what it refers to.
No, but your listeners don't know this.
Yeah, well, okay, I was going to get into it a little bit deeper. The first exposure to the Glass House is back in the early 70s. Playboy
Yes, sir.
magazine ran a 2-part story covering Glass House.
Yes, they did.
House 1. Okay. But back to Cinque, Ronald DeFreeze.
Yes, sir.
All right. I remember I had gotten out of law school, and somebody else who had gotten out of law school called me up. I was in Nashville. So what's going on, man? He said, guess who I just saw? I said, who? He said, that punk ass Ronald DeFreeze. I said, where did you see him? He said, well, you know, I'm working for the California Attorney General's office. He just walked out of Elville Younger's office. I said, no shit. Are you sure that's him? I said, I haven't seen that punk in years and years, because this brother had gone to John Muir with me too, but he'd wound up going through UCLA Law School. So I heard from him a week later. He said, yeah, that was Ronald DeFreeze, because I walked up to him and spoke to him, and he responded to his name. Now, the interesting part about this is, why is Ronald DeFreeze coming out of a meeting with Elville Younger, former California State Attorney General, former district attorney for L.A., 3 weeks before the Patty Hearst kidnapping?
There it is.
Now, see, the Glass House, I'm trying to remember the brother's name. He wrote some interesting stuff in there. And in Glass House, too, he talks about how with the LAPD burglary squad, they burglarized Angela Davis's home.
Yeah.
That carbine, and the other weapon, and gave it to that young fool who had a brother in with the Soledad brothers to set that thing up.
Oh, my God. And wait, brother, before you go on. So for you folks who are too young to remember this, and most of the LAPD cops who I know listen to the show today, go back and look at a book called The Melancholy History of Soledad Brothers by Min Yi. But I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Okay, anyway, the Glass House, Louis Hackwood, that was his
Yes,
name.
I know who Louis... Go ahead, brother.
I knew him, too. Interesting how deeply... He didn't tell everything he knew.
Hell no, he didn't.
But he was an officer. He wasn't just an informant. Anyhow,
That's correct.
He put some interesting things in Glass House, like how Franco Diggs, Captain Franco for the Panthers, got done in, which filled in some blanks for some people, self included. and some other things, and how he was directed by Evel Younger to.
Oh my God!
He says that in the Glass House. Now that comes because that scurrilous bandit Ronald Reagan was going around saying that communists had infiltrated the California universities, University of California. LA
That's correct.
Jumped him and said, find somebody. So he came up with Angela Davis because she was with the Che Lumumba Club some
That's
years
correct.
ago. Before
and what happened at the Marin County Courthouse when they took the judge hostage?
Yeah, that's because those weapons got, according to Louis Tackwood in that book, Glass House, he says along with the burglary squad for LAPD, burgled her home and stole those weapons and took them up and gave them to that young 15-year-old hothead who was supposed to be driving the getaway van. So
and what happened to the white judge in that whole thing?
Well, a whole bunch of people got shot, kidnapped, done in on that. And
all right, stop, brother, stop, because we have to help these folks. So for you folks who don't have a clue to what I'm talking about, I have never spoken to Judge Joe Brown. I have never communicated with Judge Joe Brown. But you need to understand what we're doing right now. He just shared something with you that I've confirmed you don't even have a clue to what's going on with the Angela Davis, the white judge who got killed, the Jackson brothers, Soledad prison. There's so much that Judge Joe Brown knows. There's so much that I know. We've never talked to each other. And if you listen to what we're telling you, I'm just going to make this real simple for you. Go back and look at LAPD, Public Disorder Intelligence Division. That was one of the biggest scandals in LAPD history. Then look back at what's called Western Goals Foundation. Because back in those days, John Birch Society, congressmen from Georgia, ran Western Goals, and they were running the Domestic Surveillance Intelligence Division out of LAPD. This is very important that you hear what I'm telling you. Because so many folks thought they were fighting the system. They think they were fighting the system, but they were doing exactly what the system wants. LAPD, PDID came under attack. Today, most of that intelligence is done by private organizations, and Western Goals Foundation is out of Great Britain. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, the congressman from Georgia running PDID, Western Goals Foundation, was supposedly shot on Korean Airline 007, McDaniel. That's how Newt Gingrich became a congressman from Georgia, because the congressman who was supposedly before him got killed. You folks have no idea what's going on, and most of the folks who thought they were fighting the system when a government agency was under surveillance, now it's all done on the fusion centers that are done by private corporations. But I'm sorry, brother, go ahead.
Anyway, you get into something, you look at it, and it's not what it looks like on the surface. I talk to people all the time that are mad at something, and what they're mad at isn't really their problem, and what their problem is they don't know about. So it is what it is, and I've said one of the problems we have as a people is that we are no longer slaves, but we do serve a vital function.
Yes.
For this system, in that we diffuse interpersonal hostility and aggression by giving the general society a scapegoat. And they can blame us. I know why America is not great anymore. It's these militant Negroes and these long hair, pinko comment, hippies. That's what's wrong with America. Or now it's somebody Reagan era is cheating on. She's got 5 fur coats, 2 Lincolns, and a Cadillac from her welfare cheats. But that doesn't happen either. But they put it out there so they can.
Hell yeah. See, now, before you go on, brother, I have to break this down. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. What the brother is referring to is Reagan ran him for president, and they had the welfare queen. Lee Atwater, who's from South Carolina as I, created that whole total bullshit propaganda. There is no black welfare queen. And yet today people still repeat that. It never really existed. She doesn't exist, but that's what they use to cause people to hate black America, even though the vast majority of people on welfare are white. But I'm sorry, brother.
Wow.
Go
Well,
ahead.
see, that, and since we talked about him early, Barack Obama and Ronald Reagan are very similar to each other
Yeah, no shit.
in the way they approach stuff or the way they address people. Reagan said, and my friend Mary Tompkins has been struggling so hard.
Oh, my God.
They got welfare queens who have 3 fur coats and driving luxury cars and eating prime rib while she has to suffer along, and it's her money being taken away to support these, et cetera, and Mary Tompkins, and then you get Barack Obama, and I have here Mary, who is suffering so and so, same kind of nonsense. You know, it's if you take political science, I think it's political science 114B or 214B, something like that, in terms of methodologies. It's down to a science. They've been working on it for thousands of years as to what works and why it works and how they can manipulate the public with the means at hand. So it's done frequently. So we have to be vigilant and pay attention to what's going on, but see that bread and circuses bit. We get fed and we sure get into our entertainments, whether it's basketball, whether it's the Kardashians, whether it was the old time soap or other kind of stuff. It really gets kind of crazy. So, you know, it is what it is.
It is what it is. So before you go on, brother, let me just tell the folks this, okay? I had no idea I was being manipulated. I had no idea I was being groomed. I told you earlier that William Jefferson Clinton, you know, he became president in 92. And when he ran, it was Bill Clinton, Ross Perot, and George Herbert Walker Bush. They're all cousins. They're all from the same small town in Europe, their families. If you guys think you decide who the president is, you're wrong.
Yes.
Okay? And 1992, as always, the election day is Tuesday. Well, Sunday, which is 2 days before Election Day, the Orange County version of the LA Times put a 2-page ad. I didn't know about it until I saw it. They put a 2-page ad, and it has a photograph of Bubba, Hillary, Chelsea, and their dog walking across the White House lawn. And says, "We would like to take this opportunity to thank the following people for putting us in the White House." Now, mind you what I say to you. This was on Sunday, 2 days before the elections, and Tuesday. Of course, my name was one of them. That's why I know about it, because folks at LAPD saw my name in the... I'm like, I didn't know this was going on. They saw my name in the LA Times. They're like, what the hell? And LAPD hates, they hate Bill Clinton. So what I'm telling you is this. Now, Judge Joe Brown just talked about this whole mayor. Go back and research Korean Airline Flight 007. Go back and research PDID, Public Disorder Intelligence Division. Go back and research Western Gold Foundation. Okay? Because the reason I'm telling you this, that happened under Reagan. Today, they are bigger and stronger than ever. And while you folks thought you were fighting the system of a government agency like LAPD doing this domestic violence, now the domestic spying on you is being done by private agencies, is bigger and stronger than ever before. And I know it's just a matter of time before they take my ass out, because they're not going to let me get away with telling you this. I'm just letting you know, if you thought that PDID, Public Disorder Disinformation, is gone, now we call it fusion centers. So for you folks to listen to me who don't have a clue, 1, research fusion centers. 2, research PDID. And 3, research Western Goals Foundation, because what Judge Joe Brown is telling you, what he experienced during the 60s and 70s in L.A., he didn't know what was going on. I do know what's going on because I was groomed by them. And even Donald Freeze, SLA, when they were planning on blowing up the Republican National Convention in 1972, folks like Donald Freeze went to LAPD, went to LA Sheriff, they told him, fuck you. They went to KPFK, Pacifica radio station. They had a polygraph come in and interview him and go, oh my God, this guy's telling the whole truth. If you think what I'm telling you is a lie, go back and look at what happened in 1972. Because of Donald Freeze and other folks coming forward, the Republican National Convention was moved from San Diego to Miami, Florida. And if you look at any movies related to Vietnam War veterans, and guess what? Once again, our Scientology boys in it. He plays a movie where he's a handicapped Vietnam veteran who handcuffs his wheelchair to the gate at the Miami Republican National Convention. What they don't tell you about that whole thing is that was all created because they had to move the Republican National Committee convention from San Diego to Miami because there were white folks in the Nixon administration who were going to use blacks, use browns, and even use white, Hells Angels, whatever, this whole domestic terrorism, and blow up the Republican National Convention in San Diego in 1972. And that's why you see this movie about Ron Kovic, born on the 4th of July. That's the movie that shows you the Republican National Convention moved to Miami. The floor is yours, brother.
Oh, well, yeah, all of that fits in. Is what it is.
It is what it is.
I had the interesting experience of having a visiting Russian professor at UCLA. She taught a course called The Sphere of Soviet Influence in World Politics.
Hell yeah.
She was an interesting woman. She had been the highest ranking woman on the Soviet Politburo at one time. And she had also been the highest ranking woman in the Soviet NKVD, which was the predecessor of the KGB. So,
brother, do you remember that woman's name?
Well, I'm not going to say it, but...
Okay. Well, wait, before you go on. So what the brother just told you, NKVD, before NKVD and KGB, now it's called FSB, but go ahead, brother.
Hold on. That was KGB that it became, but she reported at one time to just two people, Beria, who was head of the secret police, and Stalin. But in any event, she got very intrigued by the interaction of blacks and whites at UCLA.
I bet she did.
She made me her teaching assistant, and she observed that as many times as she told these white kids to check with me because I knew what was going on and could speak English better than she could, so I could explain it. She said, but they will never ask you, and then it's because you're black, isn't it? Yes. So she gave me some instructions on how this high-level stuff works, which bears out some of what you're saying here in terms of the methodology. But it's interesting in that, again, nothing's new under the sun, basically. So you do things long enough, and if you study it, you can reduce it to something of a science.
There it is.
Political science is all about. It's predictive, and it is what it is. But
it is what it is.
Country, because of its hubris of thinking that they are all fair, equal, and democratic, is very easy to manipulate that way.
And that goes back to wait, brother, what you just said is very important. So what I'm trying to tell you is, Judge Joe Brown just told you, it is what it is. What I'm telling you, when you think you're fighting the system, you're doing exactly what the system wants you to do, because after all, it's called political science. But I'm sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Now, I'm trying to use some of that so we can fight it in a different way. But here's one of the big problems with America. She noticed it, and you can read about it. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote a book called Democracy in America. It's a treatise, actually, in 1843. He notes Americans do not understand the full significance of equality. He says the average peasant frontier farmer who is illiterate, feels himself to be in every sense the equal of a PhD. What he doesn't get is that there are real distinctions in terms of the knowledge, information, thought process, and sophistication between himself as a backwoods bumpkin and PhD. He said, but there is an unusual thing in America in that although America depends upon intellect, getting it where it goes, it coasts for a long time, and it's basically driven by bumpkins who don't understand nor appreciate intelligence and intellect unless it's cunning, like he puts it, a mechanic who can come up with novel things that are out of the ordinary. But he says America has no appreciation for the intellect. And that's why at that point you had, what's that buffoon, Andrew Jackson, came up with that idea of pointy-head intellectuals, ivory tower, and you don't need to be intellectual. The first thought on an American man's mind is always going to be right, etc., to do this populist thing. And he knows how America will not listen to logic, rationale, and a reason. It deals with emotion and passion and the sense of equality. And he says, interestingly enough, he says they do not understand the fallacy of equality versus true freedom. He said they have only to look at their slaves, who are all equal in the condition of their enslavement, but they are certainly not free people, nor are they privileged to do certain things that they might otherwise want to do outside of their position and station in the American way.
Okay, brother, before you go on, you just mentioned Andrew Jackson, correct?
Yes.
What state is he from?
Homicidal maniac.
No shit. What state is he from?
Tennessee.
No. So let me enlighten the listeners, because there's a meaning to my
North
madness.
Carolina, but
No. Let me enlighten the listener. So the brother just talked about Andrew Jackson. I am from Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah.
Now, I don't get into this, but these folks really believe it. I've been enlightened because there are white folks who believe that I'm some reincarnated general from the Confederate Army. And Andrew Jackson is from South Carolina, as I am.
Yeah,
John C. Calhoun is from South Carolina, as I am. I have pissed on their fucking graves, and there are white folks who tell me it's all good because you, even though you're not a Mason, you've never been a Mason, you don't even know it, but you're reincarnated from a Confederate general during World War II.
Well,
so that's why I asked you that, brother.
See, Andrew Jackson was from War of 1812, but here, Andrew Jackson is in fact from the Carolinas.
That's right.
Tennessee used to be a territory of the Carolinas.
That's exactly right.
So he is what he is, but he got his name in the Seminole Colored Wars.
And guess what? I am Irish, Scottish, Cherokee, and Seminole. But I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Anyway, what his claim to fame was is he'd take the intermixed black and Seminole Indians, and he would take the women and children and put them in a wooden stockade and burn the stockade.
Hell yeah. No shit. And that's why, hey, I'm not gonna, I'll lie, and I haven't said this, but I'm saying on national radio, but that's why I slept with white girls on the tombstone of John C. Calhoun and Andrew Jackson. and we desecrated everything they said about whites, blacks, Native Americans, and others.
Well, it's an interesting thing about some of the people who've been president around.
Hell yeah. And here's the sad thing. So if you go back and watch this whole thing with Kevin Spacey, and I knew why they took him down, because he talks about the Bohemian Grove, but he also talks about the Native Americans and everything else. If you go back and look at that whole thing, there's a episode, I think in season 4, where they even talk about Native Americans on the wall in the White House. And now you got this, Democrat who claims that she's a Democrat and she's a Native American. What I'm just trying to tell you is this. My blood is from the Kiowa Indians, that most folks have never heard of. My blood is from the Eastern Band Cherokee. My blood is from the Seabrook Indians. And what's going on right now, there's a whole lot of stuff going on with John C. Calhoun, what the brother just talked about in regards to Andrew Jackson, and what's going on in South Carolina. And if you notice, all these folks behind the scenes always involved with the Republican Party and the Tea Party and the John Birch Society and Donald Trump, it's always somebody from South Carolina. Why? We're from the 13 original colonies. And I went to the College of Charleston. That was the first municipal college in the United States. Now, of course, they're not the longest running, because when 1954, when they had the Brown versus Board of Education, the College of Charleston decided to become a private school and all that, no niggers in. I was groomed. I was educated by them, because they really believe I am some bloody offspring of some Civil War general that I don't give a shit about, but they think I am, and they've enlightened me. So listen to me, listen to Judge Joe Brown when he's talking what he's saying, because he's talking from a totally different perspective from me, or from I. Well, I am from Charleston, South Carolina. Judge Joe Brown from Los Angeles. I'm telling you, everything that Judge Joe Brown has told you today has been 100% effective. But what he doesn't realize, long before Los Angeles, it was Charleston, South Carolina, and these folks think that I am some reincarnated image of their Confederate general. So please listen to what Judge Joe Brown is telling you about Donald DeFreeze, the Symbionese Liberation Army, LAPD, Ron Karanga, and all these folks, because it all created in LA, but it started with Charleston, South Carolina. Please go on, brother.
Well, I'm going to have to get off. I've got something to do in 2 minutes. But it
is what it is.
Hey, everybody, power to the people. Keep on pushing.
Yes. Thank you.
So before you go, brother, I just want to say something. While all you folks thought that I was angry at Judge Joe Brown, what you don't need to understand is I was mentored, I was trained by OSS, Nazis, and ONI. And when even Judge Joe Brown thought that I was being antagonistic, I knew how to bring him onto the show to share stuff that he would have never shared if I didn't do what I did, because he was going on this rant about, we got to spank our fucking children. It ain't about spanking your children. You folks don't have a clue. When you think you're fighting the system, you're doing exactly what the system wants. And some guy with the initials PW, I'm going to call you later because you just fucked my life on this radio show.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you,
Judge Joe Brown. Thank you.
By the way, spoiled, spare the rod, spoiled the thing. Everybody, over and out. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We're so appreciative. And to the subscribers and everyone watching live here, and those who will watch this, obviously, when we repost it, thank you for bearing with us. You might have noticed me and Dimebag did not vocalize too much of anything during this.
So since you spoke on that, there shouldn't be no comments in the comment section talking about we overtalked Joe Brown and Mark because we didn't say anything.
Right. And also, I also want to add this too. Some of y'all who've been watching the program, the whole thing, you might notice I fell out of my chair. It's only because it's so windy out here. And I know you guys have heard the wind, all right?
Well, we went from wearing jackets, did not have on jackets, to putting on jackets.
And it was the wind that blew me. I know there were some disparaging comments talking about Tree Powers needs to stop drinking and this and that.
Well, they see the evidence right there.
But, I just want to let you all know, we're all on the up and up. There's no funny business going on over here. What you might have thought you might have interpreted or seen that might have been incorrect, you just saw the wrong thing. When I was talking to our off-camera personnel, I have to because I feel obligated to because I want to keep the integrity of the show alive. You know what I'm saying? You might have construed something.
Gotta get us ran in.
You might have thought you heard something, but I'm telling you, you did not hear that, and you did not see that. Seriously, you really didn't. You only hear and see what you think you want to believe. And I'm telling you what you need to believe. What you need to believe is we brought you on two of the most powerful cats cracking right now. And they told you, and Wesley Snipes, if you're listening, please, brother, please. I'm trying to reach out to you. Come on the show. We really want to hear from you, brother. We got two brothers that know you, Mark from Anaheim and Judge Joe Brown. Come on the other morning show. We're laid back. This is a family over here, dude. We're laid back. This ain't no gotcha piece. This isn't no bullshit. We love you. We love all the work you've done. And we want you on the show.
We'll even leave the set while you're talking.
And also, Brother Ron from We All Be, I'm going to... I would like, I'm going to call you after the show and see if it's okay. But I would really like to make a situation where Mark from Anaheim would be on your show. You know what I'm saying? Because it's all about getting the information out. You know what I mean? This ain't about me or Dimebag. You know what I'm saying? Let me put the light on him.
No, don't.
Yeah, I'm going to put the light on you. Like we're at the police station.
No.
But the thing is, this is about getting the information to you guys out there. You know what I'm saying? The people who are listening, the people who've been down with the show forever. Yeah, we're not the Fox News, man. If you want a fancy ass studio, tune into fucking bitch ass Alex Jones. But if you want real,
I want a fancy studio like Alex Jones.
Oh, come on now. But if you want to hear real tangible information, the other morning show. And with that being said, I'm True Powers Mine.
I'm Dimebag Darley, and this video with Judge Joe Brown and Mark from Anaheim is the results of when you bring two knowledgeable alpha males on the same show at the same time.
Without a script.
Without a script, and let them go unfiltered and uncut.
Yeah, and this is, you know what? This is important. This is how men supposed to act. At the end of the day, we come together. We get our little things out, and we come together, and we talk about what needs to be talked about. We don't get guns. We don't hang up like little bitches. We talk about it like men. You are a man. And the woman that's sitting beside you deserves a real one. Be a real motherfucker.
So stand up and pee and not sit down. Peace. And we out.